Great.
Good morning. I'd like to call the the regular board meeting for Tuolumne Utilities District of Tuesday, March 14th to order. Director Boatright, would you read us in the pledge, please?
First, pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Public forum. We would like to welcome the members of the public who have taken the time to attend this meeting and provide, we're going to do roll call first, right?
No, well, I'm present, so you can call it.
Okay. We thought we did a formal roll call. We'd like to welcome the members of the public who have taken the time to attend this meeting and provide comments on matters related to district business. Any member of the public may address the board relating to any matter within the board's jurisdiction. This does not need to be related to any item on the agenda. However, the board cannot act on an item unless it is noticed on the agenda. Persons speaking during public comment will be limited to 5 minutes, or depending on the number of persons wishing to speak, it may be reduced to allow all members of the public the opportunity to address the board. Anybody here would like to address the board? Mr. Crosby?
You know, if the appointment was a specific agenda item, if I should be able to speak to that during public time, or is now?
Are you here to speak on it? Okay, then you could wait till then if you'd like.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else like to speak on any matter relating to community business? Corey, anybody on the web?
Not that's indicating no.
Okay. Mr. Perkins?
Yeah, thank you. President Kearns, Vice President Ringen, board members, and audience. Yeah, the reason I want to speak, I just feel it's really important. I'm really compelled to kind of give you an update of what we've been up against the last few weeks with these storms. You're all aware of how severe these storms have been, and it's no new news to you or secret to most of you how these storms impact TUD. They have, over the decades, they've impacted the district in one manner or another, and in some different degrees of severity. So, back in December and January, we had a series of major atmospheric storms that came into here and impacted our crews, and we all commented on what an historic event that was, and the level of impact that brought to our crews. And we're in the middle of recovery from those atmospheric rivers and those storms. It's going to take months and months really to fully recover, especially with the impacts to Phoenix Lake. Well, now, we've had a series of storms in February and March that, again, has caused us trouble the likes of trouble we just have never experienced before. With the amount of snow, the intensity of the snow, the low snow levels, the PG and their issues with the canal and feeding us water, the power outages, the falling trees, the impacts to treatment plants, the ability to treat water, just very, very difficult. The distribution crews fighting leaks, a lot of trees went down, caused an awful lot of leaks in systems where plants aren't treating water, we're out of power, it's just difficult. The collection system team was also, working around the clock, trying to keep lift stations going where power was outage, or we lose a pump, or just like in the Little Springs area, we had some damage to some part of the collection system where we took on an awful lot of rainwater for days. I don't want to sound like a broken record to you. I know it just seems like it's repetitive, but it's so important for us and you, the decision makers, to really hear what's going on. This was the most difficult challenge we've ever faced here, at least in my 23 years. I can't think at the time, in all of my 40+ years of living here, has seen anything like this. I was here for the 82-83 winter, and remember the foot of snow in early April in Tuolumne. So this is different, and the impacts are significant. And your crews are tired. They're exhausted. They're not unhappy. They're not disgruntled. They're doing their work, but they're very, very tired. To the point where it's not really safe. You can't expect this type of workload to be on our crews time and time again. It's very difficult. And I know maybe this is I would like to think this is a one-off, but it wasn't too far ago, 2017 and 18. We had, more atmospheric rivers that impacted us in a different way. But, all of the things I've heard and listened to in the last several years is we can anticipate this sort of erratic weather behavior that's going to impact us. Where there's extreme drought and we don't have enough water, where there's wildfires or the threat of wildfires, or the PG&E turn off the power to protect the public safety, those impacts us to extreme weather. All of that is very, very taxing on us. And I just want you to know that your crews are out there doing everything they can within their power to keep all of our services in operation, but it's very difficult. Anyway, Abby had some things, I think you want to follow up on something, go ahead.
Sure, and so Steve and his staff, who are amazing, and Danica Bland, who does payroll, put together some information that Steve shared with the managers yesterday, and that are pretty extraordinary that we haven't seen here at the district before. So Danica put together, quantified the amount of overtime that was worked between February 20th and March 5th. That's the pay date of last Friday, the 10th. So that's what we have available. So that was before the atmospheric rivers we've just had the last few days. So there'll be more to come on that, but this was really for the impact of the consecutive significant amount of snow that we got across the Tuolumne County, even at low levels, but really consecutive and compounding snow at higher levels, and the amount of work that had to be done, particularly in the raw water system. The ditches had feet of snow in them, and just trying to get water to the water treatment plants was quite an effort. And so we had one individual, we have our top 10 overtime workers had more than 40 hours of overtime in that period of time. The top one had over 80 hours of overtime in a 2-week period. So we've got, like John said, exhausted workers working in pretty hazardous conditions up there. I mean, think about yourself trudging through multiple feet of snow and shoveling out ditches for 16 hours a day. Not very fun. They're not complaining. They are tired though, and so it's just very significant to us. And then so our job is to support these individuals and make sure that they don't get injured. We have not had an injury during that storm. Again, we have gotten through. We have superintendents and supervisors and foremen that are watching very closely, making sure that our staff is being safe. But I just want you to know that our overtime is over 4 times the average overtime for that time period. And so it is a significant amount, and the majority of the overtime was in the raw water system. So.
Let me ask a question, John.
Sure, you bet, Dr. Reed.
How did things work out with those poor folks up there in Upper Crystal Falls that the TUD repaired the pipe that the tree took out, but then it was a problem with PG&E getting up there?
Yeah, so you're talking about the Longueway break. We had many breaks, but the Longueway was one of the more significant mainline breaks, and we knew right away, thank goodness for SCADA and alarms, we had a major leak. Didn't take us long to locate where the leak was, but we couldn't get there. We couldn't get our equipment there. There were down hot power lines. There was 4 or 5 feet of snow, and snowing a foot every 2 hours seems like. We couldn't get access there. We worked really hard with the county. They were very usually work with helping us and PG&E to kind of focus to get us in there to make that a major repair. I forget how many yards, 40, 50 yards worth of bill slide got washed out and over the laundry and exposed, I don't know, 20, 30 feet of that Tech pipeline. But that took, I think, 2.5 days before we got back to water. And it'll be this summer or spring before we're back there making the permanent repair.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Director Boatright?
Yeah, since we talked about that, I thought the tech line was due for replacement. Totally.
It is, so I forget, there's, up to like 9,000 feet of this line to be replaced over all these years. And we finally got to it several years ago. We did what we call one phase where we replaced several thousand feet, completed another phase just last summer, I believe. And on our CIP are 2 more phases to get rid of the rest of it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Don. Anybody else, public forum, before we close it out? Anybody else online there, Corey?
Not at the moment.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to next item of business, Melissa.
Okay, consent calendar. Item number 1, minutes of the special board meeting of March 2nd, 2023. Item number 2, approval of reimbursement claims for director's statement of meetings attended and or travel expenses and claim summary for February 2023. Item number 3, authorization to declare surplus property, vehicles, and equipment. Item number 4, consider adopting a resolution concurring the nomination of Scott Batterman to the Executive Committee of the Association of California Water Agencies Joint Powers Insurance Authority. Item number 5, board to consider authorizing Blackwater Consulting Engineers Incorporated on behalf of Tuolumne Utilities District to submit a funding application for the Mueller Mutual Water Company Consolidation Project through the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Item number 6, consider adopting a resolution authorizing the submission of a State of California Department of Forestry Cal Fire Climate Investments Wildfire Prevention Grant for the TUD Critical District Facilities Fuels Reduction Phase 2 Project, Twain Harte Wastewater Plant.
Okay, would any director like to pull any of those items? Director Rainey, you got your hand up first.
2.
Item number 2?
Yes.
Okay. And Director Boatright?
Item number 5.
Okay, 2 and 5. You have one too? Okay. Right. And Valen. Okay, let's start with number 2, Director Rainey.
Okay, I sort of made a promise that I couldn't keep to myself, that I wasn't gonna pull the claim summary today because we got such a big agenda, but couldn't help myself. On page 2, B of A, that's my favorite spot to go look at. I just find all sorts of gems in there. On page 2, B of A, Eagle Grit hand cleaner, 1 gallon, $184. Since when?
Yeah, I mean, I can look it up and tell you, but that's just the inventory description. It's probably 100 gallons or whatever. It's a 1 gallon container. So I can look it up and see it. And the Bank of America represents where we charge on the purchasing agent has their own credit card and things, or either need right of way where they find a better deal. Warehouse worker has a card. I have one. Abby and Melissa have one as well. But in the description, it tends to come across exactly as there. I guarantee you it's not 1 gallon for 184. I can look it up, and these, just like any other item, is personally reviewed and approved by me before they're paid. So I can get back to you as far as how many gallons that is, if you'd like.
Well, as long as it's legitimate, that's all I want to make sure.
Everything on here is legitimate.
Then, also on page 2 is 1 gallon of distilled water, $38.
And again, my understanding is, you guys can help me out here, I believe it's the digester or some treatment plant. They will periodically, they go through distilled water, and again, these are cases of distilled water in 1 gallon containers.
Okay, Okay, and then my last one is on page 12, and this one is more or less directed to our GM. Marco Contreras, always paving, stop payment release. Did we finally get that paving job straightened out?
Short answer, no. It's, and I probably can't talk too much because it's a litigation. Jesse and their attorney are doing their work with each other. But we are going to make that pavement right, for sure. And protect the ratepayers.
So did they get their money?
They got what they had, what we feel they had coming to them.
Oh, okay, all right, so there's still a holdback. Okay, good. That's it.
Okay. All right, item number 5, Director Balin and Boatright wants to start.
Well, I would actually just like some further background information on this. It says that there was previous action, but it doesn't say what it was. There was an engineering report, obviously, done at some point in time.
Well, Eric, answer that question, please.
Sure, certainly. A little background. Mueller Mutual Water Company, and if you're familiar with the West Side Trail out to Tuolumne and parking area there, and the ridge that proceeds up from there, Miramonte area, Mueller Mutual Water Company is a private water company serving about 55 connections. They, as many small water systems, struggle with maintenance and operation of their system. So they have submitted a funding application for a planning grant, which they received. They hired Blackwater Consulting Engineers. That's why Blackwater is being authorized to submit the application on our behalf. So they hired Blackwater, a study was done, and they determined that the best option for them would be to consolidate with TUD. We worked with them over the course of the last 2 years to kind of identify what the project would be. We would require all of their water mains to be replaced, all of their service laterals, all of their services, their fire hydrants. And in addition, they would pay a capacity fee for us to build a new water storage tank at some date in the future, because they currently do not have adequate storage for their system. I should back up and say we provide them water right now. It's just they're a wholesale customer. So we are already providing them water, but they're responsible for their distribution system, which is in disarray. So if this application, if you were to authorize the submission of the application, there's probably a year or two, they would hopefully receive funding for consolidation because it's a high priority for the state. Their request was for $4.4 million. We would receive capacity fees in the amount of approximately $200,000 to offset impacts to our existing tanks. And then they would proceed with managing the construction, probably hire Blackwater or another firm to do that to minimize the sort of burden on your staff, because we have a capital improvement program we're trying to complete. And then after it's all done, the keys is proverbially would be handed off to TUD, and we would be responsible to manage that and operate and maintain it in perpetuity. So we'd be getting 55 new customers. It would be a big additional infrastructure load on us, but it would be valuable strategically from the perspective that the water main coming down that ridge line from Ponderosa Hills would be able to intertie with Tuolumne. Currently, Tuolumne is served by one tank, and there isn't a real clear way to maintain that tank unless the district were to build another tank or to have this intertie in place. So we worked with Mueller and with the state to size that intertie to be a 10-inch line, so that if we need to remove the Tuolumne clear well from service, we have enough volume to satisfy fire flow demands in Tuolumne for a few months time period, probably in the winter time. or in the fall and springtime, outside high demand time. That might have been more than you wanted, but that's the.
No, actually, that was all good information. How does and I'm confused here, is this the district applying for a grant through SRF, or is it mutual, Mueller?
That's a good question. I should have gone into that. The reason we're asking your board to authorize submission on our behalf for Mueller is because the state's policy is during a consolidation, the receiving water system, in this case is TUD, is the recipient of the grant. And therefore, we need to also be the applicant for that money. But it is to consolidate Mueller, and there is also a consolidation incentive. So once the consolidation is completed, we're also entitled to somewhere probably in the neighborhood of $250,000 credit, for lack of a better term, at the state to be applied towards another project in our district, because they're trying to incentivize these agencies such as ourselves to take on these other smaller water systems.
This is similar to what Curtis Creek was, correct?
It's analogous to Curtis Creek. The incentive that we will receive for Curtis Creek is a lot higher because it's based on number of connections. This is just 55. The number of connections at the school is based on the average daily attendance, which was a lot higher, but it's the same process. Blackwater was involved in that project with the school. Blackwater is involved in this project. The design would be done outsourced to a consultant, just because your staff have a lot of other higher priorities that are related specifically to our own infrastructure needs.
What mechanism or how would we track future allocations or special district that charge or money for increased storage out there? How is that tracked?
Currently, we're able to serve them with our existing storage. It's not ideal. We already are. The deal here would be that the grant would pay the equivalent to our storage capacity. And our storage capacity fee, off the top of my head, I can't remember, it's almost 4,000, 3,000 something. And that would be, credit would be paid by the state through the grant to us. We would put that in our water fund account, and our capital improvement program identifies a new tank, a new rainbow, a storage tank on top of Ponderosa Hills that ideally would be upsized and would replace the existing subsurface reservoir we have up there. That's a high priority to abandon. And so then the new storage tank would not only serve Mueller, it would serve some of our existing customer demands and would allow for the interconnection into Tuolumne and provide redundant storage for the Tuolumne service areas so that we can maintain the current clear well that we have at the water treatment plant.
Great. I don't know if I'll have any more questions. Director
Yeah,
Bailey?
you had very similar questions to me. I think in the future, something like this that the board seems to be a little bit in the dark on, it would be good, I think, to actually not have it on the consent calendar. So that's just one comment that I have here. I had the same questions, similar questions as Director Boatright. I want to know what the fiscal impact to our current ratepayers are in this acquisition. I think because we have new board members, it would be great to have had our in our policies that when we are approached, we don't go actively asking for new customers, but just that blurb would be helpful for background for the public as well, in the board packet on this. So I remember with Curtis Creek, it was different. One, it wasn't on the consent calendar, and two, we had residents coming to us, the board, and saying, we really would like you to accept us. Here's our water situation. And then the board was surprised, okay, how is this in the district's best interest? How many new customers will we acquiring? How can we make this work with, like, is this gonna be a standing asset? I mean, a stranded asset, and we figured out then how to bump up the Monte Grande tank, I think from a 50,000 or 600,000 tank, okay? So, the board was not in the dark on that. And I feel like we're kind of in the dark on this. I didn't know how many customers we would acquire, and that's a good thing, you know? So, so that was I wanted to know what financial impact. I didn't know who this, what this, Muller Mutual Water Company Consolidation Project, is that gonna be its name, throughout the duration of the project? And is they initiated it, Muller initiated it? Okay, so, what do then they are gonna be responsible for bringing it up to our standards before we take it over?
Correct, yeah, and duly noted as far as having it on the consent calendar. I will say that this is the very beginning of what will be the many steps of actual board action. For one, I can imagine that the state is going to require a water service agreement be passed, very similar to what we did with Curtis Creek. So that will come before your board, where you would actually make the decision, if this project is funded, if this project is constructed, are you going to accept them into your maintained system? And the state wants to know that, because up to thus far, all the state has is a letter on file that says the district's supportive of Muller Mutual's efforts to consolidate. It's very generic. Cost-wise, what are the cost implications? Well, there really shouldn't be any direct cost implications to the district. There should actually be with it $192,000 approximately, say $200,000 in capacity fee revenue, plus the consolidation incentive of another $250,000, plus new rate payers, plus it's going to offset expenses that we would have in the future to intertie or to build a second tank at Tuolumne, and to build a second tank at Tuolumne is several $1 million. So we feel like this is a win-win for everyone, but of course you haven't heard that because this hasn't been a subject of conversation for the board, but it will be with the water service agreement. With once this goes out to bid, the board will have to make a decision on awarding the contract, those kinds of things. And I think we're a few years, at the rate at which the state operates, we're a few years away from that.
This has been really helpful, and I think to continue their helpfulness, it would be great to have a map on where this was. I didn't know where this was, and really for the board to really understand what they're voting for here. So we can vote for one little incremental thing at a time, but then we're still kind of figuring it out, figuring our way. So what would be helpful is bringing this up again, and how does this fit in with our district? How in our consolidation plan, which you've spent a lot of time on looking at various scenarios of consolidation, where our fire-prone isolated areas are and how we can replumb. And so this would be really helpful, at least to me, to look at how this is integrated into our system and how this will help us overall. Some of the multiple benefits of this. So that would be really helpful. And let me see if I have any other questions. Okay, I think you've answered all my questions. Thank you, Eric.
I do have, unless the director has questions.
I do, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Now, the grant funding to do this, I'm going to keep my personal feelings about the state, kind of throw money towards a, private enterprise to upgrade it before it becomes a public system again. But will this system basically be totally rebuilt and brought up to our standards as far as main lines, laterals, radio read meters in the boxes, and just basically turnkey, so that when it changes from a wholesale account to the 55 customers. There is, no upgrades needed in that system.
That's correct. The 4.4 million pays for construction up to our standards, plus the upsizing of the pipeline from an 8-inch to a 10-inch to provide that intertie volume to dwelling. New surface laterals, new meters, new meter boxes, new pressure reducing stations, and credits us an amount to be used in the future for a new storage tank. It abandons their facilities appropriately, pays for the paving impacts to the road restoration, and also pays for project management and to finalize the design.
Now, just a curiosity, what would be the difference in having 55 monetarily wise, 55 customers versus the one customer? Is there a difference there? Is there?
Well, sure. I mean, right now they're a wholesale account. So as a wholesale account, they have a separate contract that establishes their rate of pay. Essentially, wholesalers pay the same rate for their water as the charge to existing customers. The difference is we would get a base rate for each of those 55. So right now with the wholesaler, they have a base rate based on their meter size and where that fits. They would now have 55 individual customers that we'd be responsible for. And so we'd be getting the base rate times that.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Yeah, I got a few questions. Based on your comments, I guess it's correct to assume this is, we're selling them currently treated water, correct? Not dishwater. So there's no treatment plant there.
Correct.
Okay, good. That's good news. Now also back to the rates that Director Boatright just mentioned. Do we have any idea what they're paying on an individual basis per customer? Is it going to be pretty much what we're going to charge them in the future? Or is it going to be
Currently
different?
paying less, and I don't have that information right in front of me. I know it's less, but the choice presented to them through this planning process to their customer base was, we finance the entire improvements to our system because it's not sustainable. We need to, I suppose you can always continue to try to repair, but the choices really presented to them were, the state is not going to give you a grant unless you can solve it. That's the preferred alternative that the state is accepting. So if you don't want to do that, then you need to finance the rest of the improvements, and the debt service on financing them was pretty high. So I don't have solid numbers for you, but they were faced with significant increases in their current rates either way, and they are desiring to proceed with the consolidation.
And obviously their board knows that, and we want to hope that they let their customer base know that as well. Obviously, right?
I can't confirm that they have,
Yeah.
but I would hope so.
And they probably won't remember, or so they'll be in here. You can expect that. Also, now with the grant, does that mean there will or there won't be a surcharge on those customers as well?
There would not be a surcharge because they would have come into the system already upgrading all of their infrastructure, and we wouldn't take it over until we've accepted it. And so they would come in as any other customer.
That's good. That's good. Okay. That's all my questions. Anybody else?
Yeah, maybe the only other follow-up, and it kind of leads back to this being on the consent calendar versus an agenda item. There's no representative here for Muller Water at this time because, basically this was under the consent calendar.
I don't know if it was because it was on the consent calendar, but just to be honest with you, the staff and they view this as one step in quite a few steps that they've already taken. So I don't know if they just thought it was more a formality because it was on the consent calendar. I can't explain why they aren't here, but we have had quite a few conversations with Mr. Krieg, Tony Krieg out there, and some of the other folks on their board, as well as their design engineer. I mean, we've had probably 6-7 meetings with them and several conference calls, including with the state on this. So I don't know why they're not here today, but I know that they're supportive and they're asking for this resolution so that they can submit the application.
And I think an important distinction with similar ones we've gone through in the past is that this is a funding application. This is not committing us, committing Mueller, anybody else. This is the state saying we're recommending consolidation. We have grant funding available. The grant funding takes care of the surcharges. And so it has to go through TUD, and this is an application for funding, much like all the other grants we do as well. So, but again, you know, their level of interest of these homeowners versus that, they've been talking to us for years and years about wanting to come on board. It's just how do you pay for it?
Director Rand?
Yeah, who is going to be inspecting that installation?
The project budget allows for us to hire that out. If our in-house inspector has the time, then what we would do is we would use him on the job and bill him to the project, and his labor costs would be covered also by the grant.
So we do now have in-house inspector for
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. That's it.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I just wanted to clarify, maybe.
Sure.
When you said surcharge, is that the same as an assessment district? So there will not be an assessment? I just want to make sure.
Correct.
Thank you.
Don?
I kind of forgot to mention, a lot of history with Middle Water Company. Over all the years, many times been a operator of the Ponderosa system, feeding them. So these storm impacts, right, that I just talked about earlier, it impacts them as well, right? And so when their system goes down for their reasons, they're calling on TUD to help them. So this is us helping them help us here in this situation. Their system is in such disrepair. They used to have relatively decent storage volume water in their system. So we would feed water into their tanks up high in their system, and their tanks can take the buffer of the demand. Well, their tanks are in disrepair. It's about 10, 12 years ago. They just, without letting us know, they took the system, those tanks off the line. So now there's no buffer. So when there's a high demand or a line break, their entire system goes out of water. So it's and probably the reason why Tony's not here is because he's out there working on the main line. Right now. So anyway, there you go. More to the story.
I'd just like to make one statement too, that this is one of the roles that TUD plays in the community. I mean, we have a lot of these small water systems throughout the county, and have for years. And years ago, there was a lot more. And one of the things that TUD and TCRWD before then, and Trumbull County Water District Number 2 before them, their role is to take these systems that have fallen into disrepair, that have come under financial problems and failures. And this is one of the roles that TUD does. TUD does not seek these companies out to take them over. That is not our place. Our place is to be there when those companies come to us and say, hey, we need help. How can we consolidate with you, just like what Mueller has done here? And this is how the system works. And in this case, it appears to be starting off on the right foot, and looks like we'll have a nice system to take over at that time. And more importantly, those ratepayers will have a good, dependable system, water delivery system when it's all done said and done. So, anybody else? Barbara?
Yeah. So since those tanks up there act like they help, they were helpful for TUD. Would that be part of the plan to refurbish those tanks, and would that cost be included in some of this?
Eric had mentioned that as part of the deal is they're going to pay a pretty significant capacity, $200,000. We're going to apply that $200,000 to rent a new tank that will provide that same service, but it'll also benefit TUD as well.
So I absolutely agree, that is our role. And however, I think the role of the board is to get the big picture, where we are in it. Here's the timeline. I remember with Big Hill, that was just unique. and for the customer base up there, for the amount of money that we put into it. So I think that yes, you're absolutely correct, and that is our role to require. But it is helpful to see that the tank is gonna help us. Here's the whole scheme, this is how it fits in. This is in the consolidation, this is how it benefits, and here's all the boxes we can check, and here's the grants we're gonna go for, here's how much time I'm spending. That is helpful to me to unpack it a little bit. I mean, we're all in agreement that consolidation is a good idea. I like a little more information on what I'm voting on.
Okay, any other comments? All right, then I'll entertain a motion.
No public.
Oh, sorry, you're absolutely right. Is there any members of the public that'd like to comment on any items of the consent calendar? Seeing none, Corey?
Not at the moment.
Okay, now I'll entertain a motion.
Well, I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Director Ring and seconded by Director Boatright to approve the consent calendar. All those, any other discussion? Hope not. Any other, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. Those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 4-0. Melissa?
Okay, regular business. Item number 7, board to conduct applicant interviews and consider appointing a candidate to fill the vacancy on the board of directors.
Okay, after conversation this morning with the general manager, we've decided to interview the candidates by alphabetical order first. So we'll go with Mr. Carl and then Mr. Jacobs. And so how are we gonna do this? Are we gonna have them both in the room at the same time? Have one of them remove? I mean, what's?
We'll have both here.
Okay.
Okay, we'll just have Troy, you wanna come up first, on the podium? Give you a few minutes to tell us why you're here, and if you would like an opportunity to ask you some questions.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for having us down here. I've got a letter from you guys with 6 questions to answer in 5 minutes. So I'll do my best, but don't hesitate to stop. My name is Troy Carl. I grew up here in the county. My parents were both educators. I lived here through high school. Grew up in Brentwood Park, and the sort of water system played a big key of a big part of my childhood. And weirdly, now that I've moved back, still as an adult, I remember as a kid exploring the ditch just above our community there, enjoying that, seeing the water treatment plant right there off Canada Drive that fed us or got us our water. I moved out of the county, got a BA in English from Pacific Union College over in Napa Valley. After that, I ended up in Seattle and taught high school English for a while, both English and English as a second language. Eventually worked at REI, the outdoor company, doing customer support, sort of advanced store logistics, conflict de-escalation. If you called and freaked out about your shoes, sometimes I would get to talk to you, which was always fun. But learned a lot of skills there, sort of how to work with people, how to de-escalate issues. My wife and I decided we wanted to move back to the area. My father was here in town, my mom had passed away, and my wife's family was in Sacramento. So we moved back here about 10 years ago, and my goal was to open a coffee shop. I thought I would find a place within months to open. That took 2 years. I remember actually calling TUD a couple times when I was looking at prospective locations, and I said, hey, any idea where the sewer line is? I need to do some plumbing improvements. And was told, oh, we actually have no idea because they had inherited a crazy old system downtown. I opened the coffee shop eight years ago as sort of a mobile setup, and then ended up downtown Washington, or downtown on Washington Street. It's called Union Hill Coffee. I ran that until this summer, where my partner and I sold it. 3 years ago, my wife and I had a son, and so currently I am the primary caregiver for my son. having my son, we now live in the same neighborhood where I grew up, which is a little weird to have some of the same neighbors. But it's been just a joy to take him out and enjoy the county. I'm a big fan of this area and want to do what I can to support it. Since we moved back, I've been involved. I was on the school board at a school in town for several years. I volunteered as a basketball coach at that same school. I've been involved in some trail advocacy groups throughout the community. And then most recently have been helping promote disc golf here in the county. I got a project approved through the county to put in a public course at Pioneer Park out of Columbia. We're just finishing fundraising for that and hope to have that online this summer. As far as why I was interested in this, applying for this position, I just am excited to sort of help keep the system going. The system was here for so long. It was a big part of my youth. I really enjoy showing it to my son, experiencing those same things, that really cold water in the winter that comes out of the tap, that good tasting water that we were able to enjoy. And I just want to see it keep going. I just have been really pleased with the interactions I've had with TUD staff throughout the different phases of our life, whether it's repairing the ditch locally or helping me get my business started. Everyone's been great. This last storm, it was heartening to see TUD trucks everywhere, trying to get in, trying to get the work done to keep the water going. And I think that's great. There was a question about sort of board community interactions and what skills I might bring to that. I really like asking questions. I want to know what's going on. I want to know why things happen. It sort of drives my wife crazy. But I really do want to learn what's going on. So I'm thrilled at the chance to be involved, to get more education about this sort of system, the challenges, to see what we can do. I like to listen to others, I like to ask questions, and I'm very quick to say, I don't understand, can you help me understand this more? I found opening that coffee shop, it was not something I'd done, the construction, I hadn't done any of that before. And one of the best things I found was going into the health department saying, I don't understand this, can you help me? And people were so helpful to do that. As far as skills I bring, I enjoy problem solving. I have good critical thinking skills, and I want to make good decisions, sort of consensus-based decisions based on hard facts. And I appreciated what I've seen from the board here, and look forward for that opportunity. I think it would be great to develop good relationships with both the board members here, the staff at TUD, the customers, and sort of the community at large. Having a coffee shop really let me sort of develop a fun community of people that would come in, make connections, get people talking about different things, and I'd like to continue that. As far as goals, I don't have hard goals, as much as I wanted to learn more before jumping in and saying this is what I want to do. But I love the idea of resiliency. I love the projects you guys have been doing toward that. The thinning of the woods up the hill there, those raised sections of the ditch that we walk across, I can just see those things burning up in a minute, and so I was just thrilled to see all the fuel reduction. I love to hear all this redundancy, and like you mentioned earlier, it's a challenging time as far as too much water, not enough water, and I'd love to see the district do whatever they can to build that resiliency. And I think part of that resiliency is making sure that people understand the sort of the story of TUD and the unique position that we are in that the system is so accessible, I guess. And I think it's a neat thing. I think it's something that customers may even want to know more about instead of just turning on their water. Like, you know, I'm thrilled to know sort of the system behind it. Okay. Hopefully I answered some of those questions.
We have our questions that we submitted here. We'd like to go through these. Each director has submitted one question, and start with Director Bailey. Okay.
Okay. First of all, thank you for applying. So give us an example of how you handled a difficult situation or a major conflict in which you worked with others in a public setting to resolve it via compromise, negotiation, or group consensus. Give you a
Sure.
minute to think.
Yeah. Probably the most direct example would be working on the school board. It was Motherwood Adams Junior Academy, the school just off of Forest Road there. It was a public setting in that the meetings were public. And we had certain issues that would come up, be it staff or policies at the school, and it was great. It was great to try to build consensus, try to get on the same page, and I think a lot of it broke down to communication. People on the board were not hearing or understanding parts of it, and it was something that I enjoyed working through that, trying to move the information around the room to make sure that everyone was on the same page so that we could then make a good decision.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Reed.
Okay, if selected as a member of the TUD Board of Directors and after informed of, or better yet, having toured and learned in person about the condition of portions of the infrastructure, that there is a critical need for a rate increase, would you be willing and able to support and vote for such an increase?
Yeah, I mean, learning more about the system is one of the things I'm really excited about. As a board member, I would want to know as much as I could about the challenges and sort of the opportunities that the district has. Your hypothetical, if we needed to do that to sustain the district and to continue to provide the services that you currently offer, I can't say that I would be against that necessarily, but it's a tough hypothetical to come out and say hard yes. Does that make sense?
Okay.
I'm not opposed to it, I guess.
Director Boatright.
Do you have any specific areas of TUD's operation, such as raw water, water treatment, or wastewater, that has spiked your interest, or do you have an interest in?
I think sort of I was intrigued to learn more when you guys were looking at the water treatment facility proposal for Twainhart. Attended the on-site, I don't know what you call it, presentation, and got to hear some more about that project. I was intrigued by that idea of sort of consolidation to offer a better product, to sort of knock down the number of the local treatment plants to do that. And then sort of the secondary piece of that was I was thrilled to see that there was a recreation piece put into that plan that made it through that planning process. One of the things when that happened in the public comment was open. My son, who was maybe a year old in his stroller, he and I knocked on about 80 doors and tried to get people to write letters of encouragement for that recreation piece of that project. And I recognize that's not a priority for the district, but I would be interested to see what could be done to add better value to the customer in that realm.
Okay, now it's my turn. Troy, thank you for coming in and applying for this position too. What are your thoughts on the possible PG&E water rights acquisition that's been in the news lately?
Yeah, I don't know a lot of the details. I think it's a very interesting time. It's always been kind of an interesting issue just from the outside looking in, relying on PG&E. I understand the benefits and the negatives of relying on PG&E. I would really like to know more about what sort of the alternatives are if TUD doesn't end up with the rights. To see what that would look like, because I think that would really shift sort of the outlook. But I don't know enough details, but I'm very interested in learning more to ensure that this can keep going. It's been interesting as I've looked at lots around the county to maybe build a house and then walked away from them because connection issues were too dicey, and I know the sort of the pressure of the limited water system exists. So I think it's a really important discussion to have, and I would love to learn more.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you. A little bit of full disclosure, Troy, you make one awesome cup of coffee. I've had
Thank you.
coffee at the Union Hill more than a time or two, and I really enjoy this hospitality and great coffee. And I'm sorry it's you're not still part of that. Also, full disclosure, Troy's wife is a speech therapist.
Correct.
And I have two grandsons that are have autism, and Troy's wife has just been a wonderful, wonderful resource to them. My daughter just speaks so highly of her expertise and her care and concerns. Anyway, just wanted to
Thank you.
pass that along. Thank you. So, thank you, board. Thank you, President Kurtz, for giving me a chance to meet with you today and just have the opportunity to be part of what you're doing here. I think it's very exciting. It's very critical. It's crucial what we're doing here. And I'm frankly surprised that we don't have more public engagement. I think that's something, as director, I want to try to promote. I deeply love Tuolumne County. I love the county, I love the people, I love the beauty, resources. There's just so much that we have here, such a treasure that we have here. So I'm very thankful for being here and just very grateful you have the opportunity to serve. So the three things I want to get across today. First, I want to tell you about my background. I was born in Missouri, Mark Twain's home state, and raised near the banks of the Mississippi River. My dad was a truck driver and a heavy equipment operator who served in World War II on the island of Tinian. He also served in the Korean War stateside. My dad taught me the importance of having a strong work ethic and the importance of getting a good education, because he only finished the 6th grade himself. In 1971, I received a scholarship to attend Stanford University, and I graduated with 2 degrees, one a Bachelor of Science in Engineering and a Bachelor of Arts in Communication. I am a registered licensed professional engineer in the state of California. I've got decades of experience dealing with utilities and essential services, but primarily in the area of energy and healthcare. The experience I have, the issues and principles, I believe are completely transferable, so I can assist as director. I've been a resident of Tuolumne County for 44 years and a TUD ratepayer since its inception in 1992. This very week, 43 years ago, I met my bride while she was visiting Tuolumne County. We've raised our 3 amazing children here. They all live and work in our county and have thriving families and businesses of their own. So first I told you about my background. Secondly, I want to tell you why I'm here. I have 7 specific reasons. So reason number 1, President Kearns is my oldest grandson, Dean. Reason number 2, Vice President Regan is my grandson, Wesley. Reason number 3, Director Whalen is my grandson, Isaac. Reason number 4, Director Boatwright is my grandson, Thomas. Thomas has a little sister called, her name is Couture. She's the only granddaughter out of 7. And Couture's baby brother is Michael, and then newborn baby brother was born just about 10 weeks ago. So those are the main reasons I'm here in front of you. But besides my son and grandchildren, I'm here for the community's children and for their grandchildren and their children's children for generations to come. Okay, so third, I'm going to tell you why I believe you should elect me to become a fellow director. I'm looking forward to celebrating with you once we've secured the PG&E water rights. It is going to be such, it's just going to be amazing to have that in place to secure, not just provide reliable service, but secure the source of our water. Let's collaborate and to find ways to keep our water services reliable and affordable while balancing our critical need to preserve this county's rich and historical heritage. I believe my knowledge and experience will help us make wise decisions. I believe that together we must effectively communicate these wise decisions to our ratepayers. Third and finally, I do sincerely love Tuolumne County. You can be assured that the one thing that will drive my every decision is the well-being of our community and our fellow ratepayers. We must continue to respect our unique culture and history, which is known all over the globe. President Curtis, Vice President Raymond, Director Galen, Director Boatwright, thank you for giving me the time to speak to you, and I look forward to working with you to help you to see the exciting possibilities that I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's start again, Barbara.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, give us an example of how you handled a difficult situation or major conflict in which you worked with others in a public setting to resolve it via compromise, negotiation, or group consensus.
Okay, I can think of several, probably, but I'll talk about my earliest. In high school, I was very active in student government, and the high school I went to was racially charged. It was a neighborhood where the demographics was changing radically. I started as served as a predominantly white community, and by the time I was a senior, I was actually a minority student. And I experienced, as a minority student, racial hatred. So one of the things I did was form in student council, I formed a slate of candidates to bring the student body together. And it still got kind of ugly. Like there was actually one instance where I was walking one of my classes, and I had a poster that was in the hallway of the school corridor, and I saw it going up in flames. And when you see your name going up in flames, it's not a happy sight. But so that took a lot of work. It took a couple of years, but we were able to bring the voices that were conflicting, and there was a lot of conflict, and we were able to get it resolved, and we were able to form a student government that represented everybody, and we're able to work through some of the difficulties. So that's one example. It's one of the earliest examples. I could give you several more if you'd like.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. If selected as a member of the TUD Board of Directors, and after informed of, or better yet, having toured and learned in person about the condition of portions of the infrastructure, that there is a critical need for a rate increase, would you be willing and able to support and vote for such an increase?
I would be willing to look at all facts. I would be, having been a ratepayer for a long time, I would definitely want to see the facts, the supporting facts. Having toured the facilities, I actually had an opportunity to, General Manager Perkins showed me about 3 or 4 different facilities a few weeks ago. And that was partly due to some input from people on the board that thought that would be an important, important thing to do. And also, several years ago, I did some consulting work for Tuolumne Public Power Agency, and as part of that consulting work, I toured a number of the facilities as well as facilities in Groveland and other facilities. So having an engineering background and having a lot of experience in facilities, just like a car, you buy a car, it doesn't necessarily, you still have to invest in keeping it upgraded, or you're gonna have to replace it. So I think a real key part of our job is to, as I mentioned, we make wise decisions. We want to make wise decisions, but we also need to effectively communicate those simply and directly to the public, and that's a really important part of our job.
Thank you.
You got the book right.
Do you have a specific interest in any of TUD's operations, such as the groundwater, water treatment, or wastewater treatment?
All three of them are interesting. I mean, part of my background in engineering was systems engineering, and as part of systems engineering, you look at everything that affects whatever it is you're looking at, whatever it is you're trying to impact. So I've had experience with wastewater. I did some forensic engineering for Del Rio's Homeowners Association. They had some smell issues. I don't know if you're getting familiar with the golf course there, but anyway, they had some issues. That was interesting. They had a packaged wastewater treatment plant that had some issues, so we worked through that. That was pretty interesting, although I have to admit that working with water treatment plants, the smell is not quite as big of an issue. So probably water. I probably lean toward water treatment, but no, I don't mind getting my hands dirty. I've worked with the tools all my life. My dad was a truck driver, but I worked alongside him with the tools, and I'm just as comfortable in the boiler room as I am in the boardroom. So what? Bring it on. Thank you. What?
After your opening statements, I think I know where you're going with my question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on the possible PG&E water rights acquisition?
What are my thoughts? My thoughts are we need to do whatever we can to accelerate this. I've done a little bit of research. I know Tom Johnson is representing us, and he's got a pretty impressive resume. And I know that Mike Schoenhauer is PG&E's point of contact. But from what I've been able to tell, Mike Schoenhauer's been with PG&E for 35 years. So I don't think time's working in our favor. I mean, we've taken some time to build that relationship, and frankly, it scares me. What happens if he retires? That relationship that we spent years building, who's next in line to establish it? Do we have other resources that we're working with? So I think that as a director, my first priority would be to have a contingency plan to what if, look at some what if scenarios. And this is so critical, it's so important to our community and to our children, our families, and the generations to come. We need to be proactive. You've probably heard it said there are three kinds of people in the world. There are those who make things happen. That's who we want to be. Those who watch things happen, and those who wonder what happened. We don't want to be in that yet.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jacobs.
You're welcome.
Well, I think we have two great and passionate candidates here.
Director Bailey, did you get to ask Mr. Jacobs your question?
Yeah, she started, yeah. Okay, so, you know, as you know, we had originally planned to do these interviews 2 weeks ago, but because of the storm, we postponed it, and we were gonna originally the plan was to actually make a decision and appoint today. That's what I would like to do. I'd like to hash this out with the 4 of us and come up with a decision on a board member today, if that's possible. So I'd like to hear what you have to say and what your thoughts might be. Director Raines.
Well, I'm not gonna get into either one of the candidates right now. I'm just gonna say that I've been through this process several times, both as a candidate as well as board member training. These 2 fellows have really made it tough on us. This is not gonna be easy. That's it.
Okay. Anybody else? Barbara or David?
I just want to second that. I just, again, I want to thank you guys. And, you know, we moved into the division, we moved from at-large to, you know, from one vote, 3 people to one. And so both of you seem, you know, very knowledgeable and passionate about, and with your background, so it is really tough. But I would like to move, if we're ready. Okay, there's no further discussion, or do you know?
Yeah, I'd like to just say that I like both candidates. I think Mr. Carl and his passion for the community and his local knowledge, I think speaks volumes. I like Mr. Jacobs. He's an engineer. He's got a high education. He's done his homework, obviously. And he through his comments here, he commented deeply, you know, more than just the surface. He got down in there and figured that stuff out. So sitting here right now, I say I'm probably leaning towards Mr. Jacobs. That if you have something else you'd like to say, go ahead.
Well, let's talk, you know, but we're looking at everybody's background, and we're also looking at the future too, which I think the future is very important. So I did come across a letter, I think, that Troy had written in 2020 regarding the support for the Sierra Mines project. I think that was during that so anyway, so if I'd like to move that the board appoint Troy Carl to the position for division or district, I don't know the name of that, Trademark Division.
District 5.
District 5.
Well, like I said, this is a tough one. I've never seen 2 candidates that have got so much on the wall as we've got today. That I'll second your motion.
Director Ray, do you have any discussion?
Yeah, it's a competitive motion for me. I would like to make a motion for Mr. Jacobs to be appointed to the position for TUD board member.
Well, we have a standing motion, so maybe we should go ahead and vote on that first.
Public comment.
Public comment, yeah. So is there some public comment we'd like to hear? Mr. Crosby.
Good morning, board. So I had the opportunity to meet with a candidate for appointment to Mr. Jacobs in 3 different settings. I'm overly active in the community, and there were multiple opportunities to get to know him and discuss the importance of his role, his potential role on your board, and the issues that stand before you. And I just wanted to point out that he's a very unassuming, soft-spoken individual, and is very considerate and thinks deeply about the issues at hand. And I think he's, has the technical engineering background that he can apply that, not that that's his role here necessarily, but I think the depth of understanding is an asset to that role. And he really represents the impetus that we need to have behind this PG&E deal that as it goes forward, that's critical to the community. So I just want to advocate for him and ask that you, we have two really good candidates, so that's excellent. But that I believe Mr. Jacobs can really serve in many different ways on your board. And I just wanted to say that I really appreciate anyone who steps up to serve the community, right? Yourselves included. So I recognize how important that is and making that choice. So anyway, just wanted to recommend Mr. Jacobs as we go forward. And I'm not speaking on behalf of the organizations that I'm a part of, but that covers the Housing Collaborative, the Business Council, the Tuolumne County Executive, Economic Development Executive Team, and the consideration of infrastructure and utilities in all of those spaces. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Anybody else? Yep.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Foley. I've been born and raised in Tuolumne County, and I am a longtime friend of Mr. Jacobs as well. But I have a strong interest in seeing people capable of walking out this process for the PG&E opportunity that is in front of us. So it's of value for me as a resident to see someone with that kind of capacity, and knowing that the candidates are both strong and capable people. I'll just give voice to Glenn showing us already his capacity to follow out and track down these kinds of issues. So,
thank you, Mr. Foley. Yes, sir.
My name is Jeff Green. I live in Columbia, and I want to speak on behalf of Mr. Jacobs. I want to say this: in the years ahead, this board is going to have some very difficult problems. It's already alluded to, and one of the things that's happened in our culture since COVID has been, I've seen, at least my observation, is a distancing between government and the people and government agencies, which is going to be problematic as we face more and more difficult problems with utility systems, power, things like the homeless. And it's going to be critical that the agencies that serve our communities are very, very skilled at not only making decisions, but explaining them and getting community involvement. So I really appreciate the technical expertise, but what really spoke to me was the statement that Mr. Jacobs said about making good decisions and be able to explain them, or in other words, getting buy-in from the community. Because you can make a lot of good decisions or you can make mediocre decisions, but it's really critical to have a community behind you. And I'm looking forward to seeing that with this board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody on the web there, Corey?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay. Any more discussion? Rivers? Okay, we do have a motion before us. First by Director Valen, second by Director Ringen, to appoint Mr. Carl. Any other discussion? I'll call for the question. Those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
No? No. Motion fails 2-2. Okay. Is there another motion?
I would move that we appoint Mr. Jacobs to TUD board member position.
Okay. Would they like to second that? I'll second. Any more discussion? I'll just say that that I hope we can get behind Mr. Jacobs here. I think we don't want this to go beyond, we don't, myself personally, I think the way this works, that I've been informed is if we can't make a decision, it's gonna go to the Board of Supervisors. I really don't want that to happen. I think we should have our decision made here with us, and I think Mr. Jacobs has proven that he's highly educated, he's an engineer, he's got a vast knowledge of not only business, but the way things work, and he has been here a long time and appears to have a passion, as does Mr. Carl, to fill this seat. So that's what I'd like to say. Anybody else have any comments?
Like I said, my motion is for Mr. Jacobs, but I don't want to take away from Mr. Carl. Thank you for your application as well too, and your interest. It's based on education, and I feel qualifications towards understanding what we do as a board here at TUD is where I base my decision. Thank you both for applying, no matter how the outcome is.
Director Reagan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wonder if there's a real knowledge of what this position is all about. The outreach is really, really important, and we have had some issues with that in the past. And with the things that we're working on, most of it is done by staff, the GM, consultants, and that sort of thing. And we are fed that information in order to make the proper decisions to move TUD forward. So a lot of the technical type stuff, we're not supposed to get our fingers into that. And so that's the GM and staff's area. And so I just hope people understand what a director is supposed to do and not to do.
Dr. Bailey, do you have any comments?
I think, as again, both candidates are fully qualified. I like the fact that Troy is in the Twain Mark area and is active in multiple benefit kinds of issues, if you will, school board and whatnot. And you come in with a strong engineering background. We definitely have that well represented here. And so I'm looking at, in my opinion, where some of the gaps could be to go forward. I am not afraid, if you will, of the supervisors deciding for us. So I feel confident I can work again with either one, but I am not changing mine.
Okay.
I do want to say, Director Ringen, I agree with you as far as the understanding of what we do here as a board, and that we don't do the engineering, and we don't do a lot of the main public outreach or fill out applications for grants, different things. And it's hard for somebody on the outside to actually understand what we do from this chair until they're actually in this chair. I can look back at rose-colored glasses of how my election went and how going through and a change of the color of the glasses once sitting in the chair to understand what it means to make policy that governs this. But I do think as a board member, I have a obligation to the public, not so much in a PR campaign, but when a member of the public comes up to me and has a specific question, I have the responsibility to be able to clearly answer the question as far as whether it's a project, tank realignment, acquisition of a system, grant funding, and how that comes down. That's part of what's played into my decision here, where I'm at.
But I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, except that that is a big portion of our job, at least in my opinion, is PR and being able to have a complete understanding of the system and how it works. And so that, I mean, I get cornered all the time and questioned, and I look forward to it because there's so much misinformation out there that it's hard to tamp it down, but if they come to me, then I got a chance to be able to write it. And that PR is a big portion of our job, believe it or not.
Well, I'd like to also speak to your comment, Director Ringen, about not being a board member, not being involved in the nuts and bolts of this, and that's true. However, as board members, we do need to understand, maybe not all of those nuts and bolts, but we need to understand a pretty good generality of it to be able to make our clear decisions that we need to make here. And I think with Mr. Jacobs' background, I think that uniquely qualifies him to be a potentially good board member.
Well, to follow up on what you're saying is in beginning of 2012, January, I had been appointed to the board to fill in a vacant spot of one of the directors. The first thing I did is I walked straight into Tom Seisha, the district engineer's office, and I said, I want to visit and look at every piece of the infrastructure that I can. I want to understand how it works, and I want to meet the people that are running it. And his jaw dropped. He said, oh my God, you're the very first board director that's ever asked me to do that. And so I have seen pretty much everything, and GM Perkins has continued on, and we've looked at quite a few things going on. And so, yeah, you need to know about the nuts and bolts, but you learn it here, you know, on the job, so to speak. I do it all on my own free time, but I mean, it helps me make the better decisions.
And that's interesting because that's exactly what Mr. Jacobs did. He went and saw Mr. Perkins, and Mr. Perkins took him around the tour. So that's exactly what I'm talking about myself personally too. So anyway, anybody else have any more comments? Okay, then we'll call for the question. It's regarding Mr. Boatwright's motion to seat Mr. Jacobs on the board. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Or two opposed?
Yeah.
Okay, motion fails. So, where do we go from here?
I will have to contact the county to see the next steps. I'm not 100% sure what the next steps are, if it'll go to a special election, or I'll have to contact the county and see what the next steps are.
And Jesse.
Jesse.
Yes, and Jesse. I've spoken with Jesse already. Unfortunately, he wanted to be here today, but due to the switch, he couldn't. I have spoken with the county already, and so we have to work out some details between us and them. So I'm just not 100% sure. They weren't 100% sure if it would go to a special election between the district.
The district would have a responsibility of funding that special.
If that's the way it goes, I have to contact them. So they met us well, they met and got hold of me, so we'll have to see what the next steps are.
Okay. All right, Mr. Jacobs, did you have a comment?
No, just a question. Would the candidates have an opportunity to present some supplemental information for the board to maybe have an opportunity?
For this board or the board of supervisors?
This board, to
look over before.
Well,
it
it'd
goes-
have to be at another agendized item, and we don't know where we're going right now, so we're in uncharted territory.
Today's the cutoff.
Pardon me?
Today's the cutoff.
Yeah, today is the cutoff, you're right, as far as our timeline goes. So, all right, well, I want to thank Mr. Carl and Mr. Jacobs for coming in and applying for this. It's, this is a big responsibility here, and we appreciate your interest and you making the time to come in and do this. And wish we could have made a decision today, but it wasn't to be. So we'll keep you and the rest of the public informed on what our next step is. Okay, thank you. All right, next order of business, Melissa.
Okay, item number 8, fiscal year 2023 mid-year budget review.
So. I'm assuming we want to stay on track. Good morning, Steve Sheffield, your finance director. This is probably the more straightforward of the two remaining items. But unless President Kearns, any deviation, we'll continue on. Take a break or go right into.
We've been going at it for an hour and a half. Let's take a 10-minute break and we'll resume at 10:40. Okay? That's a good idea. Steve. Thank
Just
you.
thought so, not to encourage you. Thank you.
Let's turn it off.
We'll trust that they did it right.
I don't have to sit out there and look.
That's right. I'll give it another minute here.
It does feel much better. It's a little warmer.
That's not my hand or anything.
Can you say that louder? No, I'm just kidding.
Great. Okay, call the meeting back in session here. And why don't you go ahead and read that item again, Melissa, please.
Okay, item number 8, fiscal year 2023 mid-year budget review.
Mr. Steve.
All right, Steve Sheffield, your finance director still. And normally this item is brought to the board the end of February, but with our weather event and everything going on, we canceled that meeting. So we're here today, relatively straightforward. And then let me just here so you can see it. So pursuant to board adopted budgeting policy at mid-year, there will be a comprehensive review of the operations to date in comparison to the existing budget. Projections of revenues and expenditures through the end of the fiscal year will be prepared and reviewed by management staff with a report to the board of directors by February of the operating fiscal year. The initial observations from this projection as far as revenue go, the revenue forecasts are based on actual receipts year to date, meaning through December 31st, historical trends, and anticipated consumption by district water customers for the period January through June. Other operating revenues included in the utility billing category include hydrant meters, penalties, septage, and septic fees, and were all included in the projected revenue as calculated on receipts year to date and a forecast for the remaining months of the year. Service charges based on the actual plus the remainder project water revenue approximately 2% under budget, sewer the same 2%. As far as other revenue changes, property tax is approximately $98,000 over budget, but again, that's a timing issue when we receive the payments from the county. As far as expense projection observations, we broke it down into those main categories that were either under budget or over budget. Personnel is projected to be under budget by $175,000, which is due to a variety of factors, including position changes, retirements, backfill, recruitment timing, and unfilled positions. There are also benefit changes associated with this, such as health insurance, workers' comp, PERS, and MOU modifications. Another factor for the under budget amount is the forced labor that's included in CIP. General and administration is projected to be under budget by approximately $76,000 due to a variety of account classifications, including general insurance and legal, among others. As far as over budget, as we brought to the board before in the financial reports, chemicals and supplies continue to be over budget, approximately $138,000, mainly due to chemicals and fuel. Utilities is projected to be over budget by $264,000, directly due to electricity. But the total expense projected increase is $163,000 or 0.8% of the budgeted amounts. I realize this is hard to see on screen, but the next 3 slides are the slides you have in your board packet. And they consist of the first one being the combined budget report, which essentially shows the current total budget, the fiscal activity, which is the 6 months year to date, the variance between those two, and then the percent remaining. The top half of it is the revenue classifications, the bottom half of it is the expense classifications. And this is the same format that the board receives each quarter as far as the financial report. The next slide is really more directly related to this in that it takes that same classifications in the total adopted budget, and then the middle column is projected based on analysis of each of the classifications, discussions with staff, and year-to-date activities to come up with the difference or variance between the budget and that. And those were the variances I just referred to in the previous slide. More importantly, if you go down to the very bottom, if we harken back to when we adopted the fiscal year 23 budget, we actually adopted a budget with a deficit of $2.9 million, including the CIP. And if we stay on the track that our CIP is valid and these projects are undergoing, we're going to complete those projects. We basically have an increased deficit of approximately $600,000. So we'd be looking at a projected ending deficit of $3.5 million rather than $2.9 million, if you will. The final one, again, almost impossible to read up here, especially for the members of the audience, but in the board packet itself, which is online, this is the second time we've presented the detailed CIP to the board. It was requested by the board, and when we did the last financial, we said each quarter, we're going to bring you the actual CIP status report. And so what this represents is on the far right-hand side, it either has a 1 or 2 or 3 per funds, 1 being water, sewer being 2, and 3 would be internal services, or benefiting both of those, a description, and then to start with, we ranked this or sorted this by largest to smallest. So when we adopted the fiscal 23 budget, the single largest project was the Ridgewood transmission line and consolidation. And so that's how this has been sorted. Then going across in there, if there were any budget transfers between projects, that would show to give a budget combined as of now. The next 3 columns on there represent non-labor, meaning specifically not our labor. Could be an outside consultant, contractor, could be materials, supplies, but that's really what the budget is based on. The budget does not include our own labor. However, as our own forced labor works on these projects, we track that, and that gets added in that middle column. You can see for 6 months, we've had $500,000 of our own staff. So that's part of that difference in the budget, compared to actual for labor. And then the last column on there really represents the material budget remaining that's out there. And then down at the bottom, you'll see in the far right-hand corner where it talks about grants. We don't budget grants because typically we don't have a funding agreement, and any grant money we receive is going to go right back into the CIP, so it's not really coming out of it. So as we have grants that you'll see down at the bottom in there, we take the total CI spent, so far it's $10 million. Then we back out the grant. This year, obviously, the largest single grant involved is the Sonora Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant. And so we separate those out to come up with how much we've included, not including the grant programs, and how much we have to finish it off. And then lastly, just kind of an end, and we can go back for any questions, but the real objective here is to adhere to our budgeting policy that we present to the board, where we're at 6 months. It is 6 months, and as we all know, there's things happening now. There's going to be a lot of things happening in April, May, and June. But essentially, this review projects the district having sufficient revenue to meet its operating expenses. So no budget revisions are recommended this time. I'd be happy to answer any questions on this.
Sure, Director Bailey?
Yeah, could you, Steve, well, thank you for all that, and thank you for the clear presentation. Back on that one combined budget report, where it says expenses, okay, it looks like, percent remaining, that all that's looking real good. Although I'm noticing for utilities, could you remind us what is all included in utilities?
Essentially, it's electricity.
It's electricity. So we're actually,
So,
we got 43% of what we budgeted remaining.
and if everything was spent exactly month by month and everything else, you'd expect that to be 50%. So it's 43% because our electricity has been higher than budgeted. So we have less. If you look at the other categories, you can see most of them are hovering around that 50%, where you see a higher number, like 70 or 80%. That's typically something that we haven't done yet, which we may be planning on April, May, or June. But, the two categories we've been watching all year has been chemicals and supplies. You can see we're right at 50%. That's mainly due to the fuel prices coming down a little bit. The chemical costs are still high and going up. And then utilities is essentially our electricity cost.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, repairs, I'm a little surprised to see we got 69% remaining.
What's that?
The repairs?
Well, when you say that, that's one of those categories that's tough going into it. Repairs could be, a falling light post out here that we didn't expect, or something else. Or repairs could be, we know we need to replace the awning or redo the lift station or whatever. So we go into it both with supplies and repairs. We don't really know material cost, and we don't really know, and part of it is our availability. To be honest, our construction and maintenance guys have been out in the weather here rather than doing some of these scheduled work orders. So, and typically we get a lot of that repair work done in April, May, and June. And so I think we go into it kind of just in case, building in. We have a lot of repairs we like to do, but on a daily basis, we're triaging, deciding where to go, what to do, and that sort of thing. So, we're running a little bit under budget, which is a good thing compared to the opposite one. Whereas chemicals, we've been watching all year. They just keep going.
Very familiar with that. And like you said, this report is ending 12/31, so all the repairs we've just done recently is not reflected in there.
The hard part with this report, I first bring it to you the first quarter, and we're only
Sure.
3 months in. We can't really tell. We did our best budget we could. This one's kind of, okay, middle of the road. Is there anything dramatic? The next one, we're going to be talking more about next year's budget than where we are in this one and stuff. So that's kind of how it unfolds.
Any other comments? Director Boatright?
Now, on the expense sheet, on the lower half, where it says expense,
Which one? The first one?
I believe it's page 2, actually.
Okay. The projected or the combined budget?
The mid-year,
Mid-year?
that one.
That one.
Okay.
Now, on the lower half of that, where it says expense, say like chemicals and supplies that's running behind at this point. We budgeted 2.3 million and we're currently at 2.4 million.
That's the projection. So that middle column, we're taking, what do I think is going to happen the next 6 months? I'm taking what's happened the first 6 months. I'm talking to the superintendents, purchasing, everybody else. So on that one, I'm projecting we're going to be over budget by $138,000. Utilities, $264,000. The other ones, personnel, we're a little bit ahead because of forced labor. Services and repairs, about $6,000. Not really enough to mention at this point, but we keep an eye on it. Stuff.
All right, thank you. That clarifies what I was looking
Okay.
Director Green? Don't you remember?
He wants to wait till after it's all spent.
So again, Again, this is one that's pursuant to our policy to bring to the board, ideally in February, so we want to get to you as soon as possible. And it's recommended the board would accept and file this report.
Yeah, no action needed, so. All right, last chance, any other questions?
I just, yeah, toss one out here. Now, as we adopted the budget and looking at the 3.6 million deficit offset for some grants, are we projecting to complete all those projects, Mr. Perkins?
No. For certain reasons, if you want specifics here, I'm going to go into it, but for specific reasons, certain reasons, projects won't be completed as scheduled. Whether it be a project delay for land acquisition, project delay for CEQA environmental process, permitting, you name it.
Yeah, and
6 weeks of storms.
yeah, okay. And I totally agree. I mean, just because one project gets knocked off because of one thing doesn't mean the rest of them will incur that same thing. So there is a multitude of reasons. It was just kind of a general overall question to see if that $3.6 million deficit is going to.
Just a little bit more on that. That is just something, I've been in the management role for 7 or 8 years now. And it's something I've had to kind of learn and adjust to. But Eric will tell you this is pretty consistent, year in and year out. You have your game plan for the year. And then the year happens to you when the reality is 12 months later, this happens. And so for all the reasons we've talked about, it doesn't go as planned. But we do a darn good job of completing the most critical projects in a timely manner. I'm pretty proud of what we've done. All the years, a lot of years.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I agree, that was one of the things that I had to wrap my mind around. It took me a while sitting here. A lot of those things, as staff has explained to me, is that these things have to be on the budget, because even though we're very highly confident that it will not take place in this current year, but it has to be on there because it might be part of an application for a grant or some other funding mechanism or CEQA or whatever it is, that it has to be at the top of the list and be included, even though we know darn well it's not going to be this year. And that's what skews that and kind of goes against my grain a little bit, but it's not the way we do it in private industry, but that's the way it has to be done sometimes here. So anyway, that's my thoughts. Anything else on this item? Okay, we'll go ahead and receive it and file it. Thank you, Steve, appreciate it.
Public comment?
Oh, yes, public comment. Anybody like to throw their 2 cents in? Corey?
No, at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
And then there's a motion to accept and file.
Oh, you do need a motion. Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to accept and file.
I'll
Okay,
second it.
okay, it's been moved by Director Balin and seconded by Director Ringen to move to receive and file. All those in favor?
Yeah.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 4-0. Okay, Melissa.
Okay, item number 9, authorize issuing the Proposition 218 notice.
Steve, is this you again?
This is me again. I think I'm ready. So one of the questions that was thrown out there for these candidates for the vacancy was if there is a critical need for a rate increase. Well, just as kind of a summary, in January, we brought to the board a cost of services analysis presentation and told the board at that time we thought we needed to do a rate study. We needed to look at this. So the board directed staff to proceed with that. February 14th, the board reviewed the draft cost of services rate study report. The next stage in this is where we're at today. As you can see, I put up a timeline for what's called Proposition 218. Anytime a governmental agency in California needs to increase rates, specifically utility rates, we're required to go through a Prop 218 process. And so there's a very specific timeline, and that's what was brought to you in the rate study and that sort of thing. And the district rate study concluded that rate increases are necessary to meet annual operating and maintenance costs, to maintain sufficient capital improvement plan reserves, to maintain reasonable operating reserves, and to maintain adequate debt service coverage ratios. The proposed rate increases are also needed to fund the future large capital improvements included in the 5-year CIP. So what we brought to the board today is the actual notice. The way this process works is we come up with our proposed rate increase, and then we're bringing to the board, in your board packet, is the actual notice. It's a 3-page document this year. If you remember back when we did the PG&E notice, it was a little bit different format with graphs and an outreach campaign, if you will. But this one, much like the rate study, was designed to be very straightforward, transparent, understandable, and basically to spell it out. So in your packet, that draft that we have, or the proposed notice for your consideration, is essentially 3 pages. The first page spells out all the details. The second page talks about how a customer can protest. And the third page is the actual rates. So if we're looking at the timeline, and what we're doing right here is what we're proposing today is what the rate study came up with. I want to stress up front, I know I've mentioned this to each of the board members before, but this is kind of setting, based on our analysis, these are the rates that are needed right now. And the goal is to get to July 1st when these rates will go into place. These rates represent the maximum that the ratepayers could be subjected to. And so today what we're seeking is the board to authorize the mailing. So what will happen after this, if the board authorizes the mailing as it is, on March 30th, Emily's going to assist us, and Abby as well, we're going to coordinate mailing the notice to every registered customer, both landlords and tenants as well. At that time, they will have 45 days to file a protest. So you can see it's a couple of weeks. We've established the mailing, how we go about it, and we can generate the mailings. Then the next 2 are actually legal notices, much like a public hearing, that Melissa will coordinate with us. And those go out the first week in May, May 10th and May 10th. May 3rd and May 10th, and they will be in the paper, on our website, everything coordinated on that. Then the real critical date is May 17th. Everyone has to have a minimum of 45 days. So if we authorize the mailing today, we mail it out on March 30th, May 17th would be the first time. That's not a regular board meeting, but historically, because of the public interest, we've always had a special public hearing specifically for the rate increase. So based on the timing, we've proposed May 17th would be that day. That day, we can hear from customers, we can receive protests until that public hearing is closed. Then at that time, the board decides exactly what they want to adopt. They can adopt a different schedule, different amounts, whatever, as long as it's not higher. So they can't go any further in there. That's essentially the way the process works to get to that. So we can take information between now and that. But the timeline, the ultimate goal is July 1st. It coincides with our fiscal year, coincides with our budget. We're going to start the budget process very soon. Next month, we'll be working on that. So this is kind of the critical timeline, if you will, here. So with that said, we are wanting the board to see the public notice that we're proposing to mail out and seeking the the board to authorize staff to proceed with the mailing of the 218 notice to all of the water and sewer customers. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Director Boatright.
Well, maybe this is just a bit of housekeeping. Previously related action, in page 55 of the board packet, says January 10th, 2022. Is that supposed to be 2023? And then
Yes.
followed by February 14th, 2022.
Correct.
Okay, so that
My,
just basically a little bit of housekeeping on that.
my humble apology.
These years are changing, I'm fully with you, Steve. Can you clarify the date of adjustment for the rate for the board? The date that the board would have the ability to make action or take action to adjust the rates up to the full amount of the Proposition 218 or Process 218?
Sure, I mean, Jesse would be the legal authority, but my understanding, having gone through quite a few of these previously, essentially, as we've laid out the timeline here, it would be the May 17th date is a public hearing. We can receive comment, we can receive notices, we receive anything, but when that public hearing there, then the board will be asked or desired to make a formal motion to adopt the rates. At that time, just like with any other motion, you can adopt the rates as recommended, as presented. You could propose to adopt the rates something else and do that, but ultimately it's the board's decision what the rates are. And that is the formal time period. Once it goes May 17th, then the next one will be to publish the actual notice with the rates, which would happen May 31st. And then July 1st bills would include
All right, thank you. That's all the questions I have at this point.
Okay, anybody else?
Questions?
I got a question, Steve. You mentioned that, where was it in the timeline where, I guess it's right there with the highlighted, the public hearing to adopt, where the board could change the rates as well, but not raise, could go down but not raise. Okay. Okay, so we can reduce them if we saw fit there.
And I'm not sure exactly where all your thoughts is going, but one thought I have is that to me in this process, what we've gone through with the rate study and where we're at today, today I think it's much more important for the board to tell staff to authorize us to send a notice. And that's the real question rather than the amount on this notice today.
That's where I was going with my question.
Of course, they go hand in hand, okay, like I don't want to be associated with this and whatever. But to me, and, chime in, Don, if I'm going down the side road here, but again, what we've come up with is what we need. And we showed you the rate study, we showed you came up, and this all revolves around next year. This isn't 5 years down the road or anything else. The rate study is designed for our immediate needs and to keep the same level of service we have and to maintain our CIP plan. It's not back weighted, it's not spread out evenly over this, it's up front. This is what we need. I understand it's a lot. Any rate increase is not accepted, but the sheer fact with everything that's gone on in the world recently in the 3 years, and our operating cost, and now we're having this, we just heard about the overtime and everything else. This is what we need. But today, in my mind, it can be, it's up to the board's discretion, but in my mind, this isn't so much about, is it 28% or 25%, whatever. It's about, does the board approve proceeding with the 218 process? Then we have that time period between today and May 17th to take on additional feedback, to have additional board discussions, to whatever we can provide to the board for you all to be comfortable with the rates we're gonna implement here. Does that help? Does that make sense for the board, what I'm saying?
So we're not necessarily being asked to approve these rates. We're being asked to approve the process to get the ball rolling.
And I mean, just to be perfectly clear, we are gonna send this out. And as you know, as soon as this goes out, I'm kind of surprised it's not here already as far as the news and the headlines, but when this goes out, that's all everybody will be talking about and stuff. So on one hand, the rates do matter, what we're gonna send out here, but these are based on our existing rate study. These are based on the last 2 meetings we had with board action here. However, it is not open and shut. This is it. This is subject to, it can be further discussion, further modification, as long as you don't make it more on that. And if we don't change the methodology, that's another critical part. This is based on our existing methodology, how we bill customers right now, meter sizes, how much per cubic foot of water, all those. If you change any of those methodologies, then that is a new 218 process as well. We thought it was most transparent, most understandable that the existing structure we've been on since 2015 stays the same. It's just proportionately increased across the board, both base and consumption.
So you spoke to the treated water side there, when you spoke about meter sizes. So on the raw side, that would be my understanding, sure, if we change any of that, that would be a significant change that would.
The existing rates in 2015 applied and calculated the cost, both for treated as well as raw separately. And so those are still in place. So the raw customers, whether they're metered or unmetered, will receive a proportionate increase under the existing structure, the existing methodology that we have in place right now.
Okay. Director Ringen?
Yeah, I've given this really a lot of thought over the past few weeks since this was brought before the board. And I went back and revisited the board meeting when all of the information was put out. I paid particular attention to Director Boatwright's questions and thoughts, as well as Director Balin's. And what I've gotten from that is now some heartburn. I think there were some good points brought up, and I don't know what the answer is to it, because I know the TUD needs money. But one is that huge jump right at the beginning. That's a shocker. And two is that we should have included in this somehow what we think the PG&E thing is going to be, because we're going to slap our ratepayers for this now, and then maybe who knows what the timeline will be. I don't know whether it'll be a year or what it'll take to finally come to an agreement with them, and we're going to be coming right back. And I don't know. It makes me really queasy. I think this could have been done a little bit differently.
Well, I'm not quite sure how to respond to it could have been done differently. I'm open to suggestions. As always, I've always told the board, whatever you want, need, and everything else. From my perspective, two things is, unfortunately, historically, this district does not do rate increases. Past directors have chosen to not do a rate increase year after year after year, and then all of a sudden we're faced with a 25 or 30% rate increase. Unfortunately here, in hindsight, we held off raising rates because of COVID. Everybody was struggling, everybody's hurting, we didn't know where we were going. In hindsight, we should have had a cost of living inflationary increase. We have not had a single increase since January 1st, 2020. I don't know of anything else that hasn't gone up in that time in my life. I think TUD has done an amazing job with what they have. You've alluded before that 12 years ago, we were brink of bankruptcy. We were deficit spending. We had zero CIP. You know, this last rate increase, 2015, for 5 years, we put $40+ million of infrastructure into the ground we're benefiting from now. And so, you know, the reason for that first year jump is because we didn't have an increase past 3 years. And all of our costs went up. The reason that it's a jump in the first year is because if we don't jump the first year, we will continue to accumulate deficit losses. So right now we're projecting $3.5 million loss. Well, I'm projecting 4.5 next year. So if we don't do a jump, now we're $8 million in the hole after 2 years. The rest of the years, unlike the last rate increase that went up every year, this one goes down every year. So there's very little inflationary increases after that first year, and how much that's really going to make a difference. Now, as to your comment about PG&E and heartburn, we've been talking about PG&E for 7 years. We've worked on it. We issued a Prop 280 notice to our customers telling them we needed $4.5 million for PG&E. And we didn't even know if that was enough. The reality is we can't force PG&E to do anything. And we're doing everything we can to make this happen because it's for the benefit of the community. However, realistically, if PG&E told us today, yep, you guys can buy it, it would be at least, I'm guessing, I'm not the operations guy, it'd be at least 2 years before we took the keys and started spending that. So for the next 2 years, we don't need monies from our ratepayers for PG&E. And that's the real critical thing is we need money from our ratepayers for basic day-to-day operations. For our guys who are working 163 hours in a 2-week time period, one guy. That's what we need this for, and not the PG&E. Will we have to go back to the customers for PG&E? Yeah, but I'm not sure when. And so I don't really view it as you know, slapping our customers right up front and doing that. This is necessary based on all the things, you know. We want to, I don't know. Don, please.
To PG&E, you know, I'm trying to address your question, your concern with PG&E and this rate increase. As you know, I keep in contact with Mike Schoner on about a monthly basis, and I do give him another call in another couple of weeks. You know, there's no, on one hand, for the most of you, there's no certainty in what's going to happen with PG&E. Because I'm in close contact and talk with Mike on a regular basis, I have a level of certainty that early in the next year, we will be back at the table. And we're collectively, we're bright people. We understand, and we can figure things out. We're gonna have to, so that's where I feel about with PG&E. Now, as to, you know, asking for a rate increase now and PG&E, you know, 2 or 3 years later, you know, how impactful that is. I feel, again, I know that we can work this thing out. Oh yeah, so if we have new rates in July, it's only for the first year that you're approving. You cannot approve a 5-year rate increase. Every year after that, you'll have the opportunity to go yes or no on the new rate increase. And you can lower that rate increase if you want to. So you're not going to be asked, nor could you adopt a 5-year rate increase. So now, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, it's not really safe and helpful to be speaking hypothetically, saying things, you know, that just you don't know, speculating. But let's hypothetically, PG&E comes in a year from now, like they say. We will necessarily have to go back to the negotiating table, start working on things that should take some time. If the information that we gather collectively says, yeah, it's time to act on this PG&E thing, you'll do another 218 process, where you scrap the old one, the one we're talking about now, and work on a new 218 process that incorporates. And, you know, we've said PG is the most important thing that can happen to this county for every generation that comes after this. That none of us are saying that's not true. So if that's still true in a couple of years, then we'll make some tough decisions. We also know that our current, what is certain is our current operations are struggling. We are just, you know, our infrastructure that, you know, I'm not making excuses, but, you know, we were handed and we accepted after we were handed, a dilapidated system, and we continue to accept other big hills and Montegrams and others. We have our hands full trying to make sure that we can continue to deliver reliable, safe services. So that is certain that we have this need today. PG is still uncertain to some degree, but again, I know collectively we're all bright enough to get to the table, roll up our sleeves, and figure out what's the best thing we can do at the most affordable costs when that day comes.
I think Barbara was first.
Steve, I appreciate your comments and the methodical rollout that you did in preparation. Did a good job preparing the board. There were questions regarding PG&E and the rollout for this, et cetera. I don't like feeling pressured that if I don't vote for this, I don't support the crews. I just want to say that, okay? I know they're working hard. I know that they're tired. But I'm looking out for in my opinion, what I think is the best for TUD in the long run. So I just want to say right now that this argument is not that I do not support everybody here. I'm making a decision in a different way. So just saying that, okay? Because hey, the crews need this and that, and therefore you have to vote for this. Okay, I'm not saying that's what you said, but I feel pressure. So it's how I'm receiving that. So I just want to say that right off the bat. It's me. So I don't have any argument with the need for this money. My argument is some others that I'm not prepared to discuss right now, but it does have to do with the timing. It has to do with our ability to be prudent and look at the long run that includes PG&E, and I'm looking at that. It is the board that has to backtrack or be crow or adjust, the board has a different role here. Typically, the board will get voted out if the public doesn't like something because the public doesn't have the majority to protest. So they take it out on the board. So right now, I'm just gonna say that I'm very concerned about PG&E. I'm not really sure, we'll work it out when the time comes. And so at this point, at this juncture, I am not ready to authorize this notice. That's just me. Again, for a variety of reasons that I'm not prepared to discuss.
So when this 218 notice goes out, how much of that finance chart that you made up is the ratepayers going to be able to look at, see how the rate increases you've lined out are going to work?
So I'm not sure if you're alluding to, but what you have in your board pack is what will actually go to every user. So the third page breaks it out. And I think context is important here. First of all, Barbara, I'm sorry if I put pressure on you. That's not my intent.
No, it's how I receive it.
I'm passionate about this because I just have deja vu. Okay, I'm going to share with you right now. I share this with the managers that when I arrived here, it scared the crap out of me how bad we were financially. And I was hoping that we've come a long way and it's much better. I hate to see it go another way. But we're to the point now where we need a rate increase for whatever reason we want to do it. Secondly, Director Ringen, the majority of our customers do not exceed the 800 cubic feet per bill.
Right.
Okay, over 50% do not do that. So what we're proposing here would be an additional $18 per month. Yes, it's a big jump, and $18 a month is a lot to a lot of people in our community. I understand that. But that $18 will do so much for us. It will cover that $4.5 million deficit for water, let our CIP keep going, as well as fund reserves and debt service. So context is important, but what the customers will receive is this actual 3-page document you have in your packet. It'll arrive in a standard TUD envelope to them. It'll be on our website. It'll be in the paper. It'll be published there. They can immediately start filing protests. Anyone, and we'll accumulate the protests going forward with that. But
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Director Bowray? I've got some conflicts going on in my mind, trying to understand that May 17th, if this rate proposal goes out, such as it is, are we able to adjust for water the five-year rate increase of 35.7? For wastewater, it is 34.3. Or is it just on an individual basis? Because our first year for water is going out at the 28%, and first year for wastewater or sewer counts is 17, followed by 14.
And water goes
if
from 2%, 1%, 1%.
Right, I mean, they follow out through. But if we send this notice and then on May 17th, we come up with a alternate rate increase for the first year, something lower than the 28, are we able to add anything that we decrease off of that to the subsequent years? Can we change the math? Okay, so that.
I'm glad you asked the question, because this needs to be clarified for all, okay? So the proposed notice is telling the customers, here's what's proposed, and this is the maximum, and you can protest. The purpose of May 17th is, one, to see if we receive more than 50% protest, we can't go any further. The whole thing's done. Typically, you don't receive 50% of the protest. May 17th comes along in there. You want to reduce the next year's, so it's not $18 a month, it's something less. And you want to add that on the subsequent years where it's only like $1 or 50 cents or whatever else. You cannot increase any individual year going forward. It's not a total on one. You can only propose a 5-year rate increase, and as Dawn alluded to, very next year you can come back. And like I told you all before here, we're going to watch this like a hawk. So if things turn around, the economy, inflation drops, and everything starts doing better, and we get all these grants, we may come back to you next year and say, we don't need to do this rate increase at all. You know, the 17 for sewer, we may not do that. We could recommend it every year as part of the budget process. We're going to address that. This just says this is what you may do. Now, at that May 17th, the board could make a motion to adopt it as it's lined out. Make a motion to adopt it, but change the first year or change subsequent years. But again, it was designed this way to address our immediate need and our immediate level of service without continuing. One of the things we heard about the last increase was they're raising it again. Every year it went up. Every year it went up. Well, here it's going to go up that first one, $18. But by the time you get to the end of it, it's not even a $2 increase. It's $1.50 a month or whatever increase. So again, but good point in there is that if you want to change the way that's spread out, now's the time to do it. I'm just saying, you know, we talked before about the last 2 meetings in that this one's loaded this way versus flat or versus ramping up. And so I mean, if that's a critical thing for you, I don't think you were here at that last meeting when we talked about it, you came in late. But if you want to, you know, I mean, that would be one choice. But this is what your staff, your management is recommending and proposing. But certainly if you, you know, if the need to delay it or change it or bring PG&E, you know, the struggle with PG&E, we don't have numbers. I mean, we don't know that last flume they just had, it was huge. The 200-foot tree took out section 4, whatever. We don't know what that cost them. And so we had numbers from them dating back to 2018 when we proposed the last PG&E.
Let's not talk much more about PG&E. It's too speculative.
Yeah. So we can't include PG&E at this time, I'd say. But good point, David. I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, it certainly answered the question that puts that, you know, the methodology of the rate increase has to be exactly what the board wants to be. Otherwise, come May 17th, you know, you can't, you know, drop the 28% down to a lower number and add it to subsequent years is what I'm hearing. So the board needs to, you know, look at right now before the notice goes out as to, are these numbers what each individual board member feels comfortable with raising those rates up to at this point in time? And the subsequent rate increases for water, you know, that's almost, you know, as I'm looking at the numbers, it's insignificant compared to the primary or the first one. I haven't, you know, and, you know, lack of understanding, and I realize that TUD's budget works different than my checkbook does. But this looks to me like we are trying to superfund the CIP to totally cover that, whereas it doesn't show that it's actually necessary based on we don't complete CIP every year. So the deficit spending until June 30th, you know, the last requisition coming in, final invoice, we don't know how deep we've gotten into that deficit spending that the board authorizes with the budget. And like I said, right now, this is, I agree that rates have to increase. I just can't get behind that the first year that they need to increase the 28% and a combination of the first 2 years at 31% for the wastewater. I need the numbers put in front of me that, you know, I can understand that before I can fully get behind telling the ratepayers of TUD that this is exactly how and what it costs. I do agree that everything has gone up. I just haven't seen, and I've taken the hit. I've seen the 1.5 times my normal PG&E bill come in at me. I've seen, you know, my grocery bill go up. I've seen my television cable service bill go up. But I've seen it go up incrementally, you know, take out PG&E out of the equation, a pretty sharp increase in groceries. I'm just, you know, the 28%, like I said, so for myself, I don't see it. Do I see a balance over 5 years that we potentially are at 35.7? Sure, I'm open to that. But it's the board's responsibility to understand, be given information, understand that information as to are each of these subsequent years, you know, viable? Do we still need this? Do we need a little less? Like I said, you know, the way this is, we are going back to old school with TUD. We're not going to raise rates, not going to raise rates, not going to raise rates. boom, here's your hit.
That's what already happened, is we didn't raise rates.
You know,
Now-
but this is exactly how it happens again though, Steve.
But
Is 28%, 2.6, 2.4, 1.2, 1.5.
we've addressed that based on our assumptions. Now, again, I don't know what I can provide you. I'd love to hear from the other board members if you feel you haven't been provided numbers. This is based on the rate study. The rate study is a detailed down level line item analysis and projection for the next 5 years. We provide that to the board twice in that. We can provide you, I've always said, my door is open. If you want to come in, you need any additional information, I'll provide it. The challenge and difficulty is what happened in 2015 is we ramped up because we were so far behind. They didn't want to jump the rates up. If you remember, the board members who are here, you were offered 3 options, what the rate should be, what the middle of the road was, and what a minimum one would do. The board selected the middle one and it ramped up. What happened is we generated deficits for the first 3 years. By year 4 and 5, we were back on even keel. Right now, as it stands, we have almost 0 in our capital reserve. Part of this projection, part of this funding is not funding CIP we don't do. This is to fund reserves and CIP. Last year, we did all the CIP we budgeted to. And so right now, if we go ahead and finish it, which we can do that, we're gonna lose $3.5 million. Next year's projection, if we do all the CIP, is another $4.5 million. So there's $8 million we're in the hole if we don't adjust that first year. Going forward, I'm not saying don't raise it at all, but our projection after that first adjustment, we will be able to put money in the reserve and fund and look for grants. Because right now we don't know how many. We're promised a lot of grants. They're not in hand. We don't know yet. We're promised inflation is going to come down. It went down a little bit this month, but not as much as hoped. But we're seeing other economic factors in the world that we didn't expect. So back to your point, if you can't understand these numbers, I will do whatever it takes for you to understand them. We can come back to, if the other board members feel this way, we can present the rate study again. I don't want anybody to feel pressured. I don't want anybody to not understand where the numbers come from. But this is our best analysis right now based on operating costs and what we did and to maintain what we have. I will say if we want to address other methodology about how people are charged, that's a different animal. We went into this saying our existing rate structure is accepted. It hasn't been challenged. This is what people understand and this is what we need and how we're going to get there. If we want to look at other types of methodologies, then I think we're going to have to go to an outside consultant and that'll take a while and money. But whatever the board's directive is, we're here to serve just as you are here. But again, the other 3 members, would you like more information on the numbers or what we presented understandable?
I think you did a good job putting it out the last time. I didn't necessarily like what I was looking at, but I think that you did a great job of putting it out in the easiest way for us to be able to understand it. One thing that,
you had a comment,
yeah, one thing that, excuse me. One thing, unless I misunderstood, we're gonna have to vote each year on the, let's just say this goes in place. Why is it not a 5-year deal like the last one?
It is. I think Don's just looking at a little bit of context. Different general managers have handled this differently. As far as Prop 218 says you cannot propose rate increase for more than 5 years. So we're proposing 5 years. If the board authorizes and accepts this rate increase, then each year it could go into place automatically. Typically, what most agencies would do is I'd provide you some sort of an end of the year report. And before July 1st, that next rate increase go in there, it could come back to the board for their consideration. It doesn't mandate a resolution to accept it or whatever, but we could recommend a lesser amount. We can't recommend a more unless we want to go through another 218. And that's like, so does that clarify?
Yes, thank you.
Good question.
Yeah, I just got a couple of things. I get it, Steve. I mean, I'm in business. I know that everything's going up and it makes sense to me. We do, I believe, need a rate increase. I tend to like the way you have it structured where, we rip that Band-Aid off and take the hit right up front, because it does free us the ability to elect not to do some of those down the line. But I know that's gonna be a hard sell. That's gonna be an extremely hard sell. And we're gonna take heat for it. And I agree with Director Boatwright on that. And it's difficult. But it front loads the rates. It gives us a bulk of the operating revenue that we need to continue flowing. I do have some issues with some of the others down towards, like, for instance, our ranching customers and whatnot. I'm very, very sympathetic to that portion of the rates, and we can take a look at those again. But this is a tough one. It's a tough one, and I'm willing to hear what else anybody else has to say.
I do have another question.
Sure.
Steve, could you explain what capital reserves are in terms of, I mean, that's money that's just held in a bank?
Essentially, it's the difference between assets and liabilities would represent the organization's equity or fund balance, if you will. So if you have 10 million in the bank and you owe $8 million, you have $2 million left. Out of that $2 million left, we can have what's called legally restricted funds, like when we collect capacity fees. We have to separately account for those, set those aside. They cannot be spent on anything except what they were collected for. It doesn't necessarily go into a separate bank account, but our accounting records would show that. So let's say we have $1 million of capacity fees. That leaves us $1 million unrestricted. Now, after legally restricted funds, there's what's called reserve funds. The board 4 years ago, adopted a reserve policy that addresses emergency reserves, contingency reserves, and capital reserves. And the board adopted a level that's equal to the next year's CIP. So right now, we should have approximately $7.5 million sitting on reserve. We don't have unrestricted reserves in our fund balance that matter.
Is that a difference between water and the wastewater?
No, these are separately done by each fund on there.
So there's actually
And
two
this
reserve.
last audit was the first time that wastewater actually went into a deficit reserve.
Sure, Barbara. Thank you. You're done, Director Bush. Yeah.
I just wanted to go on what you said on that customers, and I'd really like to see a workshop on with our end customers and even discuss the formula, how the amount is actually arrived at, how do we prorate, maybe it's time to revisit that. So I support what you're saying, taking with our end customers.
Yeah, again, just to reemphasize what's spelled out in the rate study, we calculated the funds needed and we applied those to all customers the same. So raw water customers received a 28% increase. The majority of our customers are half-inch contract. Their base charge would go up $9 a month. For the majority of our treated water customers, 28% represents $18 a month. So those were applied across the board.
Okay, so what's the pleasure of the board? Is there a Motion to be made, or Director Rain?
Okay, very reluctantly, but because I know that what Steve has set out for us and Don, as far as where we are financially, I will make a motion to authorize issuing the Proposition 218 notice.
Is there a second?
And that is to hazard.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I'm on a very tight income, fixed income, and this is gonna hurt me. So I know there'll be a lot of other ratepayers out there that this is gonna hurt, but it's either that or not getting clean water. The choice isn't good.
Roll call, is there a second?
No, but I do have, when you call for discussion, I'd like to add something. Or
You're not on the second. Okay, well, all right, I'll second it for based on the discussion.
Okay. Okay, so, you know, my big concern is PG&E, and even though it is, they are restructuring, they continue to signal us that they are, in giving us reassurance that that process is going, and that they, you know, we can get back on track, and they gave us a date, correct me if I'm wrong, this year, 2023, the end of 2023. I think that's still good. Okay. I'm not opposed to the need for this. However, the timing of it is such that I'd like us to adopt a notice further towards PG&E, us getting back on track with PG&E. And I just feel it's more prudent to really look at the whole thing, and by then we could maybe have a workshop with our ad customers and look at that restructuring and maybe add that into this process as well. So I'm not for just throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I'm for postponing this further down the road till we hear from PG. I think it's going to bring this.
So I have a question for you. So, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that you're not in favor of voting on this or any other rate increase until we have questions answered from PG&E. Is that correct?
No, until we, not questions, but until our negotiations are at a point where Mike Schauner signals to us that they have, they've divested into this other LLC, and that LLC is ready to do business with us.
Negotiate in good faith.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Right, it's not just. Yeah, that, and I think it's also a good time to really revisit how we prorate that, you know, how much, just a full board discussion of that, because that is sort of factored in here.
Director Reed?
Yeah, I'd like to tag on with what Director Balin's saying. I don't understand how that would correct the issue right now that finance has and TUD has. Like I said, I'm reluctantly, I made a motion to move this thing forward, but if we delay a rate increase, what's going to be the outcome? I mean, financially, we're in trouble. See, that's the thing. I mean, do we want to sacrifice proper, safe service and all that and kick the can down the road? Or, I mean, like I said, I'm not comfortable with this either, but it's a best of two diets.
Okay. Any more comments, Director?
I think I have a comment, but I have more of a question on parliamentary procedure from where we're at right now. We have a motion and a second. that vote is actually null, that means that, you know, basically there is no need for further discussion unless it's rethought and re-brought up as an initial agenda item. Is that correct?
Back to the drawing board, right, Steve? That's what it'd be.
If the motion fails,
Yeah, if the motion fails.
I don't think you can bring the same item back up. But again, I'm not the parliamentary guy.
right, we definitely have to talk to Jesse, but I think it would be a new.
But,
Whereas if we pass this, if it passes.
Well, if it passes, it goes out as written.
But we still have the ability to change those rates downward only. Correct, Steve?
Correct.
But if it goes out as written, if you change the initial first and second year for wastewater, first year for water, you have no ability to increase subsequent years in either side as far as wastewater or the water.
Any more that's on here.
Any more than what is
correct.
noticed
That's
on
the way I read it.
218. That's unfortunately, parliamentary procedure has now put us in this position of, I don't disagree that rate increases are needed. I'm in disagreement with the methodology because, you know, even in my own personal checkbook, I may have more money than I have bills. And, you know, that's good. That's balanced living within the means. You know, how much extra money in my checkbook do I need before I decide to, you know, spend it on something or transfer it into savings?
Steve?
So
I'm
maybe
sorry,
just to
David. Sorry.
contribute to the conversation, I hear what David's saying in there. And basically, if it's revolving around your concern over years 3, 4, and 5, you know, I think a couple options come to mind. First of all, Director Rainey can withdraw his motion and just let that die. And if we all want to have a conversation about front loading or back loading or doing that. However, something that just popped into my ear over here that we really haven't discussed, but might be an alternative based on what I'm hearing from this board, is what if we just eliminate the 3 years at the end? And we take this same notice you have right here and we mail it to our customers only for the first 2 years. And then after 2 years, we're gonna be back in talks. We're gonna know more about the inflation, economy, and everything else. The downside to that is then, you know, basically we're gonna have to do another 218 if we wanna change rates after the next 2 years. And there's a cost and negativity, and there's gonna be an election at that time and some other factors that go in there. But from what we've heard, I think that's a possible solution. Don?
It's possible, but
I mean,
it's no different than, you know, revisit, you say we're gonna watch it like a hawk.
Yeah.
We're gonna report to the board what we're saying. Before each July, you'll thumbs up or thumbs down the new rate increase. So you're doing the same thing in year 3, 4, and 5 that way. But I'm comfortable, I'm a team player, whatever we're gonna do.
The struggle there though is, again, you know, one of the struggles here, even counting that I hear what you're saying, David, but I don't even, is that first year enough? I mean, I think, God forbid, I don't think it can be any higher, you know, but it could be and stuff. So I think we've done that, but those last 3 years are pretty minimal for both water and sewer. And your concern is we're back to the flat rate and we're gonna need, you know, in an ideal situation, we'd have some kind of cost of living increase over those years. But the problem is, we're not trying to catch up the last 3 years. We're just talking about next year. That's it. And again, I don't see this as super funding. I don't see anything that's a luxury in here. It's all steps in the right fiscal direction we should make. But, you know, I think the real thing the board has to come to grips with is that we go ahead like we are with the risk that those 3 years out there may not be enough, or PG&E might be back. Or an option is just to go ahead and do the first 2 years, which will get us straightened out, Or the other option is we need more work.
Yeah, sure.
So, just a couple more thoughts, just for the group to help us along here. And again, I'm a team player, and we need to kick this game down a little bit, fine. But just remember, for most of us in the room, we know what we're challenged with our infrastructure. There's no questions in our mind the challenges we have with our infrastructure. We just talked about has happened in the last 8 weeks, just in the raw water system. We're gonna need to address our raw water system to keep this from happening. This is not acceptable, right? What happens every other year or so, it just isn't acceptable. We know that we have hundreds, I'm not gonna exaggerate, we have millions of dollars of infrastructure needs in the downtown Sonora system by itself. Not to mention Brentwood, not to mention Ponderosa, where all the plastic pipe is, a high fire hazard area. We need to address all those things. So if we don't, if you know, I know that the audience, they don't have the same understanding as we do, having been here for 30 some years now at a time. The need's there. The need is greater than the 28%. The need is greater than the $18. It's way greater than that. Now we know there's no chance that our ratepayers can afford that. This isn't easy for us either. I know it's uncomfortable, Barbara. I don't know, I don't know that we're ever going to get to a place where we're comfortable about asking money from our ratepayers. It's just not a fun thing to do. Not as a general manager either. You know, I have family members here that will feel this impact as well. So I appreciate that concern and that uncomfortableness I get that done. The need's there for sure, and it's greater than $18. We've done an amazing job, right? We can agree that we've done an amazing job on behalf of our ratepayers and the county, collectively bringing in grant monies, right? Millions and millions of dollars just in the last 10 years of grant money done. You know, that's your ratepayer dollars going towards, you know, us securing those grants to help offset those needs. So and with the impacts that's happening right now to our watershed, to Phoenix Lake, and not to mention the other things I just mentioned. If we can't understand that the need is there today, then I don't know what we're getting there.
Director Bailey?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and thanks for mentioning Phoenix. And that brings up the topic of stormwater, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but the county system is the largest stormwater diverter in the county, or ditch system. Would you say that?
I'm not an expert, but it's significant.
It's significant, okay. And a lot of that stormwater gets diverted from one watershed to the next. On behalf of the whole county, I would say, okay. On behalf of the whole county, and yet the burden falls on TUD. I mean, when I look at where we need to go in partnership with the county, we have the ability to keep raising rates on our customers. I don't disagree with that, but yet when I look at the burden for the whole county that stormwater is placed on us, it makes me think about partnerships and distributing that burden countywide and recognizing that we all live in a watershed. I mean, let's face it, we all live in a watershed. It's the way the miners, you know, engineered the system. It dumps into a ravine at random, it dumps into a creek. We shut this valve off, it dumps down in there. It's a beautiful system, and not very many people understand it. It's a huge burden on us to take for the benefit of the whole county. That's the direction I want us to really look at. It's not just rate, and I don't mean just in terms of, I'm not diminishing it. I know we need the money, but I see that the burden is on TUD to manage the whole county's watershed. That's the reality here. We have made mistakes. you know, in our management, but, we are learning by it, but we can't, I don't think this is not sustainable to me to continue to raise rates while we take on the countywide burden. Eric mentioned it, when we were talking about Phoenix Lake. Okay, all the sediments coming in, we saw it, huge now, even more right now. You go upstream to Sullivan, Powerhouse, and Chicken, and the sediments coming down. Like, does anybody else see that that's not fair to TUD? Really? I mean, am I off base here?
No, you're not off base, and, you know, we need to step up to the plate and partner with the county, and the county, as, you know, Andre's here now, and we've had many conversations about joint partnership and trying to focus on the watershed of Southern Creek. That has to happen. Yeah, somehow the district, TD, has just been the go-to agency when it comes to all things water. And I love that part. I love the challenges. It's hard for our ratepayers. And so now we have an agency like the county that's willing to partner with us, and I think there's other agencies that want to partner with us. This $18 isn't even, is not considering that much of something.
Well, I appreciate bringing a little sunlight to the reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you just received a letter from Supervisor Hack, a very cordial letter, open arms. I feel like our vision when it comes to the stewardship of the watershed of Sullivan Creek is aligned now. So now, as staff to staff, we're going to start working. We're going to organize a meeting board to board.
No, I think
Clarification, Barbara, were you, part of what you talked about, TUD handling stormwater, were you in reference to, you know, the fact that the ditches take on a lot of and divert the county stormwater during storm events?
That's a lot of responsibility that crews have to make sure that, you know, weirs are shut down and they have to, it's just the way the system's designed. Yes.
Yeah, and, you know, I agree, some of the things need to change, and, you know, some of the system is fortified with bypasses or shoot overs, so that stormwater doesn't get into our ditches. Mr. Perkins, yeah, and certainly, you know, I don't relish the crews and the increased amount of work that they've had to provide and the increased amount of work that we're gonna have to do to repair what has happened in the last couple of weeks. But the county, state, and federal, there's been a declaration of emergency in this county. So we're certainly going to be able to adopt into FEMA money potentially for some of this damage that has occurred because of a natural event, you know, beyond our, you know, we didn't ask for it, we didn't, you know, necessarily foresee it coming, so. And just a shout out to the crew, thank you for your work, and yes, we do understand you're tired. We need you, you know, please take care of yourselves and, you know, continue to come back to meet the next day's challenge. But before us is this rate increase. That's correct. So if made clarification and then, you know, for what we're incurring, you know, right now. This is parliamentary. Where are we at? Got a motion, second. Discussion. I see we have a member of the public with hand up. Are we, that's still ahead of us, or?
I've just got one more question for Steve, myself. So if we were to pass this, we could elect at that point in time, at the May 17th meeting, to eliminate those final 2 years if we so chose at that point, right? So we could do exactly what you were talking about earlier, buy with drawing, but it keeps the ball rolling, keeps us going here, so we get to our July 1st deadline.
Correct, correct.
All right. Shall we open it up to any other? Go ahead and open it up to public comment.
Sure.
Okay. Anybody live here want to speak first? Okay. Corey?
We do have one person online with their hand up.
Stephanie Seuss.
Thanks, guys. Well, I don't even know what to say now. I was just going to say originally that I think the timing of this is quick, and and it also has to do with priorities. And my issue has to do with what I think 18 months ago, and what I'm going to say is nothing that you haven't discussed, but just from where I sit, 18 months ago, we were looking at PG&E, and you went out for 218, and that was a big leap. And it was right before the community was, you were going to get the meetings going with the community. And unfortunately, that was put on hold. So now we're looking at a 5-year rate increase. And I heard Don say, well, we can possibly put that on pause, or not pause. We can go in for a couple years and then we can back out. But within that perhaps 5-year period, you may have to go back to another 218 process. And that's a big lift. And I think that's also a trust issue with the community that would also make it a hard sell. And at the last meeting, I know there was some back and forth of, did this rate increase include that? No, it did not, the PG&E. And I get it could be 7 years, it could be 2 years before you need the money. But I just think there's a lot of questions. And I don't think it's a matter of whether the board doesn't understand how the numbers came about or the community doesn't understand. But if you're submitting a 3-page letter, and that last page has the rates, that's what's going to be in everyone's mind. You can't get away from that. And I get that. I'm still trying to justify in my own mind, we're going to adopt a 5-year rate increase based on our rate study, but maybe we'll only take the first 2 years. I don't know how you work that in taking off the last 3 years, even if they're only a couple dollars here and there, that those last 3 years count. And maybe you can justify it by saying the prices are going down, escalation, power, although in my experience, nothing ever goes down. So that's kind of one thing. And then maybe, again, it's a priority issue. I don't know when the first CIP that you're looking at came about. I don't know whether it was under, I was trying to look at it and going back and compare notes, and I said, I'm not going to look at this, but maybe there's things on that CIP that you want to take a relook at. And I did not know, which is good to know, that none of your grant projects are on that CIP list, because some of the biggest projects you talk about, for instance, Phoenix, and are not included in that, which kind of makes sense to me. But those also take a lot of staff time. They take a lot of, I don't know. Those are significant projects. And so I don't know if you move those into some sort of discussion point, some of these other projects, but maybe things are changing, and you don't know what you don't know still up in the high country or in other parts. I mean, we don't know what's going to fall down. We don't know what's buried under snow yet. Maybe some of those projects also become CIP projects. And what I'm also hearing in the discussion is you got a $4.5 million deficit. You've got $4.5 million PG&E costs. I don't know. It's just, there's a lot of still questions. And I know there's a need. I don't question that, but it's quick. It's real quick. And I just have this fear that if you come back within 5 years, within 18 months, within 2 years after passing this, and I think PG&E is pretty significant for the district, that if you come back to the public on this, you're not going to get it. They're going to say no. I think you get one shot at this and one shot only at a 218. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe you look at trying to combine the two. Again, maybe you look at cutting back on the CIP projects that are there. But I just would hate to see you get one and you don't have the opportunity for the next one. Because this is important, I think, for the district. I think it's important for the community. And picking up what Barbara said, it's not a bad idea trying to get the county in on it too. The ditch system is the county storm drain system. And, maybe, I don't know how the 218 process works for the county, but maybe it should be a countywide situation. I don't know if you can do that, but they've got a water agency now. They've asked for help or what they can do for you. Maybe that's what they consider doing for you, is bringing everyone in and having everyone contribute to this thing. I don't know. I took a lot of notes, but I just think it comes down to maintaining the public's trust and not hitting them with 2 rate increases within 5 years. That's all.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Stephanie. Any other comment? So Steve, again, I got one more question. So if this fails, what next? You come back with another rate increase at some point in time in the future?
Well,
Or the board, the staff does?
I'm not really sure how to respond best to that. The way we're organized, a lot of water agencies in California are part of the county, like we used to be. And so, Barbara, you would take your argument to the Board of Supervisors, to the department head, hey, we need more money. Counties are funded by taxes. That's how they're funded. We as a special district, our sole funding, except for grants, is from service charges. The law says we're supposed to charge what it costs for us to run our operations, to fund our debt, to make our CIP improvements and maintain reserves. So, it used to be the standard was do it 5 years, and every 5 years you look at it again. And you're right, there's challenges with elected officials, there's challenges with inflation, there's challenges with the community in doing that. But with the world the way it's been the last 10 years, you may need to do it more often. We've been talking about this 218 before COVID. We were planning on doing a rate study in 2019, 20. Then it went this way. So again, the need is there. The rate study concludes that to maintain our things. So what happens if we don't do a rate increase? From my perspective, I don't see a lot of fat in the budget. We worked really hard the past 13 years trying to be lean and mean and maintain the quality level of service that we do. But any challenge, just like we are with chemicals right now, we will need to look at every operating expense, every cost, anything from dues to travel to supplies, to do that if we're forced to cut costs. I don't know about whether or not you can change the service model. Could we outsource more things, do that? Is that better or worse for our customers and our ratepayers? I mean, it's all off of that. But, you know, the board's direction, again, could be take more time, come up with different numbers. This is too high. I'm concerned whether it's high enough, and doing that sort of stuff. So
Would you prefer that rather than a no vote?
what's that?
Just what you said, take more time, come back with different numbers?
You know, the struggle with take more time, and I appreciate Stephanie's comments and stuff, but we've been talking about this for quite a while, and it's been coming along. I mean, the last 5-year rate increase, your temporary GM did it in 3 months. And we tried to get a lot of input and try to sell it and do all that sort of stuff. And again, the fact of the matter is we need additional revenues to maintain the operations as they exist right now. So then it becomes a matter, if that's not there, if we're not going with this and we're pushing back, then we need to address the budget. We need to, and we're starting to work on the budget right now for next year. So it kind of hinges on that as well. But this timetable is given by Prop 218. So if we don't vote on it today, we want more workshops, work, whatever, we go forward. But, you know, I feel confident in these numbers, that this is a reasonable and conservative projection. It's not overstated, it's not understated. So really, I look to a board consensus, which is hard with 4 of you instead of 5. But the role of this board, you know, we just can't force the county to pay us anything. We can't bill them for something unless we have an agreement. And it looks like we're forming agreements with them. We've got good activity going here and doing that, but we can't run TUD based on the county water agency. That's not their function, that's our function. And so we need rates, and we have our existing rates, and what that'll provide us. Then is it appropriate to do a rate increase, and when do we do that? So I don't have a preference other than I think time is of the essence, and I think we need to propose something to our ratepayers. But if the board's not comfortable with it not including something, then so be it.
A follow-up question. So thank you, Stephanie, for tuning in and providing comments. One of her concerns, she has many, but one of her concerns was just too quick. So to the board, does that mean it was too quick on the heels of the PG 218 attempt? Or is it too quick, in other words, we'll have had 6 months to get to this point? Do you need a month to take some more time to look at this thing? Do you need 6 more months, or do you really, and I know I'm asking one question to 4 people, or do you really want to wait until PG&E is real clear?
Can I just echo real quick? I totally agree with Don, because one of the initial things when, you know, the very next day was when PG&E told us we're holding off. And what I heard was 2024, right? January 2024. So my comment was, we're not going to do a 218 until 2024. What changed? The economy, inflation, everything else. I was all set that we're going to have to stick it out, stick to our guns until 2024. Now I don't see that being good for us or our ratepayers. And you know, it's March.
Back to my question. Sorry.
Certainly, you know, I would want to try and step in and, you know, talk for Stephanie and Susan. But from my perspective, I agree with the timeline being quick. In fact, that we did a 218 for the PG&E water rights purchase and systems acquisition, and then we canceled. And now 6 months later, we are darn close, if not right at the same proposition 218 for our operational needs and stuff. And timeline for this, you know, I think there was mention of it in December, January, February, and now we're in March. So the timeline for this proposition 218, getting to the stage that it's at right now, that's pretty quick history. I mean, pretty short timeline, so it does seem quick on that. But, like I said,
Yeah, I just feel like, we have the people who work here, they have the benefit of being here. We talk to each other, talk about things on a daily basis. We have that. It's so fresh in our mind. So I know it's difficult for everybody else, but if you were listening to some of the other things I was talking about, I know I said this in every public setting that I could after I became the general manager, is we have other needs besides PG. This what we're talking about, we saw early on. What we didn't see was that sharp inflation. That we didn't see, but we knew normal inflation, remember we were talking about the cost of services, the cost, we didn't know about this thing before what happened to the regional plant. So again, for me, it's not rare. It's painstakingly slow, because the reality, and I don't want to fearmonger you at all, but the reality is critical projects that are near failure will be slowed down if we do something other than this. Now, this is 100% your responsibility. It is also 100% our responsibility to make sure you have all of the information you have to make a decision. And one more thing I have to say a long time ago is, let's not forget, right, the latest grand jury report, but in 6 instances, they urged us to do a performer rate study early in this year. So I feel good. I feel the same pressure. My pressure is different. You don't know how bad it felt when that tape fell out to me. You have no idea how bad that felt. I can tell you there are others in that same situation. And we had record-breaking snowfall in those tanks, and it scares me to death. And I don't want to fearmonger you, but that is the reality. That is the reality. I don't know how much longer, more time you need. I mean, this is a 6-month, you provided good information in January and in February. I think you all know the need is there. I don't know the answer.
How big could the need get? Because I fully understand that we have a need. But even if we, granted, because if you were to look at fixing every potential problem that TUD has, that number is just up there so insurmountable. So it's a snowball. If I give you $10 million to do something in an hour to do it, I'll bet you'd have it done in 59 and a half minutes. Nobody's arguing the need for this. Timing does, we put this on a track, and it's rolling. It's moving along with all of its targets, except for, how do we balance that substantial impact? It's not a matter of doing that. And, we talk about our budget, our capital reserve, and money that's, okay, this is to cover further on. How big does that need to be, to make sure that we stay whole? And I agree, things have gone up. I've asked numerous times, especially as we were going through, and it's kind of a little bit of shaded area because, a lot of PG&E's talk had to be done behind closed doors, and that information still remains behind closed doors because it was a negotiation. But it, coincides with this as well too, that, that last 218 that we started and stopped was strictly focused on one thing. I remember hearing the topic, do we need to add to this to make sure we're whole? And 6 months, that was back in June or July for that, 218. And now 6 months later, this, like I said, this is just, it's too big for me to swallow as a board member. And as far as the way it's laid out. Do I agree that rates go up or prices go up continuously? Absolutely. And I think we should have a rate increase every year.
Okay, well, I think we're past this over. So we do have a motion and a second on the agenda item. So do we need to repeat the motion or are we all clear to? Barbara, do you have a comment?
I just have one more comment. I would like some kind of workshop to really hash a lot of this out because to me, this is like a Band-Aid on something that's going to keep hemorrhaging. And looking at our customers, looking at, Stephanie mentioned the confidence factor. I just feel so strongly that the model is broken. The sustainability, this trajectory that we're going on as a county too, they're broken. We've got to think of this countywide and smarter and use nature as part of the solution base. We can continue with this because we can. The county can't, but we can always tax the ratepayer. But at some point, I really do feel that is not a solution or fair without a full-blown discussion in a larger context.
Okay, Ron?
Yeah, but going along with what your comments are, Director Balin, we're not okaying this rate increase by sending out to 218. We okay it after whatever that chart was that Steve put up there in May, I think it is when we finally make the decision. So we could have a workshop prior to that and hash out a bunch of stuff and let the ratepayers be able to be involved in the discussion or listen in as to what's going on. But all we're doing today is we're voting to have staff send out the 218 and get the ball rolling. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, Director Ring, you're absolutely correct that it's a motion to send out a Proposition 218 notice. The problem with the motion and the Proposition 218 notice is that each of the 5-year increases have to be what they are in the notice or a lower number.
Right.
So if on May 17th, this board decides that first year in water is going to be a 7.1% increase instead of 28%, the second year is then going to be a 2.6, and subsequently down the line, because you cannot increase that 2.6 to actually match that without throwing the model out and doing another proposition, 218 process, another 218 process to get beyond the 2.6. But, and that, and you're absolutely right. All we're here to vote on is yay or nay has written at this point in time, because we have a motion and a second on has written. And if that fails, there's just no way to pick it back up and go on without bringing this back as a new agenda item. Be that to go out for outside consulting, rate increase studies and things like that. And just a side note, maybe that's why this seems like such a fast timeline, is staff did an excellent job of putting this together and presenting it. We didn't have the one step that Barbara was asking for as a workshop to kind of snooze or hey, can we rebalance this again?
Steve?
I agree. All we're here to do is vote on, what is written at this point in time, because of the motion and the second. It's that.
So for purposes of conversation, first of all, I've heard a couple of times, David, where it sounds like you're okay with the total increase, you just don't like front loading. The problem with that is if you do, instead of 2818 for the first year, you can't just add 10 to the next year because it compounds itself. So that 10 for the next year will now be 12. And then that 12, it goes down the road. And we did the numbers, you asked us before, we did the numbers, if we ramped up, it would be more than what we present here. Now, your statement about not changing those years, I am not 100% certain. We need to clarify with Jesse on that, is that right here, here's what we put out. If we left the grand total of all 5 years, that's not my understanding. My understanding is it's year by year. But we need to confirm with Jesse that if we keep the total exactly the same, which doesn't work mathematically, because you can't just reduce the first and add to the second. The problem there is just like the last rate increase. We continue to get deficits by ramping up. Flat, you continue to have deficits. That was part of the presentation to the board, showing what the negative things was and why we went with 28%. So we need to confirm with Jesse whether or not that would change. Second of all, what I'm hearing here is not, and I appreciate your words, Ron, and hear it, but I'm just not getting a warm and fuzzy feeling that this board would adopt this. And I think it would be far worse to send something out to our customers that there's no way the board would ever approve. And that's what I'm hearing. I don't know how Abby or Emily or public relations or whatever else, but as soon as this goes out to customers, everybody's gonna see this as, hey, this is what they're charging. Whether or not we all sit here and say it's gonna be something less on May 17th. So that's just my take.
I agree with you, Steve. And I agree with what David's saying. Based on that, I'll go ahead and withdraw my second. So that because it's not gonna pass, so.
But that said, I don't know what's the next step. I mean, I feel like we present to you everything we have to present. And, if the board wants the county to pony up money for this, I guess we can go ask.
I didn't say that.
I know, I'm just thinking, how do we go forward? What's next? Is this?
Yes, I think so. I think we can, I believe it puts us in a better position not to vote on this today than it would be to vote it down. So, let's, I'll withdraw my second. We won't vote on it. We can do the workshops. We can do what we need to do to move forward on this and come up with something that we can agree on.
Maybe this is more of a Melissa question. Because we have the motion, and now you've withdrawn the second, so second is withdrawn. But even with the motion on the table, and I don't want to push or, anything for you, I'm not that. But I think even without a second, this item as is, even with no second and no vote on it, it still dies. So if Director Ringen, if you were to withdraw your motion and we motion to table this for further discussion, next board meeting or the board meeting after, or maybe we even get, a fifth member back so that there is the ability to have a quorum, we would be better off.
Well, I go back to, why did we put the finance department through the hell of putting together that, I forget exactly what you call it, when you put all, what? Yeah, rate study. And I mean, why did we do that? I mean, there's hours and hours and hours of time in there. He showed us in detail what all the figures were and where the needs are. Is this exactly what we all want? No, but, if it's exactly what TUD needs, then we need to go forward on it. This thing needs to happen now and get moving. And I have to kick the can down the road, I can see a huge disaster coming. And with the amount of inflation we had last year and where we're still at this year, TUD's in a bind.
One of the reasons for my question, how much more time do you need? A month, 6 months, 2 months? Because, you know, we have some time, we could, instead of, you know, it's convenience for July 1st because it coincides with our fiscal, our budget and all that plan, so it's really convenient, but it could be August 1st to July 1st, but I don't know how much time you need.
Well, I agree, Ron. I mean, we do. We need this rate increase.
Right.
But it's not gonna pass. So it's just not. So
We're not doing our job.
I think it's clear that it's not. So I'm trying to come up with a solution here that we can continue to work on this and so that we can find a solution and get this done as quickly as possible.
So if I don't pull my motion down, then this will die.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Doesn't it die without a second?
That's the question on the table.
Correct.
Correct. But can we continue to work on it and bring it back at a later date? That's the
You
question.
make a motion to postpone.
Motion to table.
Or postpone.
Okay.
I certainly say to make, that motion is set there can be a competitive motion. Table this item for a
Motion.
discussion.
Right, currently he doesn't have a second, so his motion dies.
That is a way out.
Okay. So the motion does die at the lack of a second. So is there another motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to postpone.
I think that's what you said, right?
You want to table or postpone?
Director Hagan, I don't think you can compete with his own.
Well, it died.
It died.
Good night.
But with the second motion, I move that we table this item for further discussion to look for a balanced approach that we can all get behind.
Is that all right with you, Director Reed?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a second to Director Boatright?
Second.
Okay.
Okay, hold on. Director Ringen made the first motion to table.
Well, yeah, but.
So are you
make-
seconding? Yes, because his motion died, that's done. So then,
Oh, okay.
so then he made a
I
second
would
motion to
second
table. So then you want to second Director Ringen's motion. Got it, okay.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay.
President Kearns,
Yes.
I have no information for staff reports, and I have a need to be at a different location shortly. That actually got even closer shortly than I wanted to, but I do.
Thank you, Director Boatright. Anybody else with staff reports? Are we good? Okay. Any directors' communications?
I have one, and I'll make it really brief. On February 22nd, we toured northern part of Phoenix Lake to take a look at the storm damage in is that the northern part of the lake? It was mentioned by, and thank you, Eric, and thank you, the other Eric, and thanks everyone for attending. That was really enlightening. It was amazing when you see that up close and personal what happens. And I learned a lot also. And I saw a lot of that upstream stuff, or just, glanced at it, that's really a problem for our water, our storage. It's a huge problem for county storage. Yeah, so then, having said that, you also noticed a piece of ground that was for sale, and which would provide access to that lake as well, and I think that's worth pursuing, and I thought that was enlightening. That's all I want to share.
Thank you, Brian. Director
Okay. On 3/15, I attended the T. Stan Irwin meeting, and it was in-depth discussion that our outreach committee is bringing before the Water Advisory Committee about making some substantial website changes that will outline the projects that the T-Stan Irwin has gotten grant money for. And like I said, I think we're nearing $30 million now of grants. And so that's going to be pretty interesting because you'll be able to go on the website and see what the new projects are going to basically be. And then you can see what's been accomplished and the amount of money that's been brought into the community. So that's as far as that goes. Then I wanted to mention that the ops report was not knocking the ones that from the past, but the ops report was the best I've ever read, and it was just excellent. So I'd like to suggest that we maybe put that back on the board agenda, because there was a lot of things in there that were interesting that could have educated our ratepayers as well as educated the board. So that's my suggestion. And then at the last meeting, I had, as usual, claim summary questions, and I was told I was going to get back, somebody was going to get back to me about engine heaters, CTFA, water rights fee, and Pulsar. Haven't heard anything.
Sure, okay. Yeah, I've just got two things I want to report on. I too was at the Phoenix Lake date out there, and that was very, very informative. Also, last Saturday, the 11th, I was at two care dinner, and always a good function to go to, and glad to represent TUD there. So, you have one other thing?
President Kearns, I would like to propose for the agenda at some point in this year a board goal setting session. We have not had one, I think, since way before this board for sure. And that would be goal setting session and priorities. So it was before 2019. And I think that might inform a lot of our discussion as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, anything else? Don, you good? You guys are good? Time to get out of here.
Low blood
We
sugar.
will adjourn the meeting at 12:41.